Greetings all, apologies for the late start. I'm going to get cracking on and get started now. Welcome everybody to the Wu-Sabat Outformation class UK. We are the United Sabians worldwide, and this class is being brought to you through All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands and the North. Today's class is going to be based on the Lost Records of Time Revisited and the Tulli Papyrus. This is part one. Probably is going to end up to be a 3-part class, but if we can squeeze it into 2, then we will do. Revisited because we've taught Lost Records of Time several times before, so this is slightly an updated take on that class. Great actual fact as it is. Okay, so trust that everybody's okay, and we're going to get started now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just run a quick poll just to make sure that you can hear me okay and that you can see the screen okay. So let's launch that now. So can you hear me over the music okay? You just need to vote in the affirmative or the negative. If you're on a mobile device, you may need to swipe left or right in order to access the poll. All right, excellent. It seems like most of you can hear us okay. If you are having problems, then by all means, simply just put some details in the chat and then we'll see how we can assist you. Now, next poll is just saying, can you see the screen okay? So again, if you can just answer in the affirmative or the negative. If you are, obviously some of you are joining us on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, you won't be able to see or vote, because it's only a view only platform. If you want to join us on Zoom, then by all means, just use the link provided, and you'll be able to join us directly in the Zoom platform for the full interactive experience. We're not monitoring the Facebook live chat whilst the class is going on, but if there are any questions, then we can pick those up after the class is finished. Okay, thank you for the vote. Seems like everybody can see the screen. Right, so moving on then. So what we're going to do is just start the class with a positive affirmation. In the Sabaean culture, this is referred to as Partak Yud, which is translated as the affirmation. So I'm going to read it in our native Sabaic language and then translate that back into English for full and proper understanding. Abdoi kaleh namazurat wufakur ame kasam un empa paut anuki jawef pa ashuk empa paut wo kaleh ashuk kawun jawef neya anuki kasam un empa paut wo pa paut kawun kasam un emneya anuki wahu ame pa paut wo pa paut kawun wahu ame neya nakuk kador najo ame kasam un empa paut wo habub ame mushachas un nakuk kador kawan kale Pafef nakuk tayor jawef pa paut ame wase ame dayarni kawun lakei bakoy jawef pa paut anuki abed bin afashni pa paut kawun anuki pa paut kador nakuk kador pa paut amul nakuk amul. So let's translate that back for you. So we said begin all prayers and thinking as a part of the all, and we're touching a little bit on that today in today's class. And we said I am in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as a part of the all expanding and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding, as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is, I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. So that was a positive affirmation referred to as Ba'h Yaanuwn in our Sabian culture. So if you join us for the first time, just a quick induction on the Zoom platform. So if you have any messages for us, not questions, then use the chat button here, and then that will basically enable you, and then everybody else as well, to see any message. Could be feedback, different things that you may want to say. There's not a question directly for me per se as a student teacher today, and you select panelists and all participants, and that basically just makes sure everybody can see the chat, so you get duplicate comments there, or questions in, or points in there I should say, that may have been pointed out already. Again, got any issues with the platform, different things, just by all means give the feedback, and the facilitators are monitoring this chat, so they're there to assist. On the left hand side, if for any reason you need to adjust your audio settings, then that's the option that you've got to do that. And then if you've got any questions for me, my name's Nabab Kaknihes. If you've got any questions for me as a student teacher, then there's a couple of ways to do that. So you can raise your hand using the option on your menu panel there. And basically what will happen is at appropriate times I'll say, is there any questions? And then the facilitators will then ask you to unmute your phone, so you get a message like this appear on screen. Excuse me. If you've dialed in, then basically you need to press *9 to raise your hand, and then you'll get a prompt when you're called to answer your question, and to unmute yourself you need to press *6. So when you are given the ability to unmute yourself, then you have the ability to unmute yourself and mute yourself at will. So if you can just make sure that your phone stays muted, not to disrupt the class for everybody else. So that's basically you coming live to me and answering your questions audibly. If you do not wish to come live and ask your question audibly, then you can put a written question into the Q&A section. That could be on class, it could be on different things, if it's a written question. The facilitators will then, as I say, read that question out for you at the appropriate time. So it's an interactive session. I'm going to be talking quite a bit, but if there's things on the screen that you don't understand, then by all means do not sit there in ignorance. This is what the platform's for. So it is a question and answer session, even though we are on selected topics, and just the reason for that is just so that we can, I suppose, make sure we're mastering certain aspects of doctrine. Now, many years ago, the master teacher, I suppose in show and prove fashion, put himself out there in terms of being able to answer various questions, anybody coming in off the street, answering any question from any book, any source, etc. In that regard, and obviously he tested himself and showed and proved who he was as a master teacher by asking those questions, and obviously as his students we did the same in those religious degrees. But obviously we're at a time where we now need to master who we are. So it's not about the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, and these various different types of books. We're now in our time, our culture, and it's about mastering what we do. So there are a number of different topics. I mean, the master teacher's written over 1,000 books, and it's important that we start to master this our spiritual science called Wu-Sabat. So the sessions are more focused, as we're not proving ourselves to the world, so to speak. We're teaching us about us, who we are, learning about our culture, and we do use some elements of I suppose, the religious books, so to speak, but that's more for comparative studies. So we've got a lot of stuff to get through. These classes are only every fortnight, so we got a lot to pack in a short space of time, so to speak. So, but it's interactive, so say please do ask questions so that you're not sitting there in ignorance. We've got no polls today, so usually you may have a poll quiz testing your knowledge, but they will be definitely coming in this session, in future sessions, I should say, about this subject matter, so pay attention. I'm sure Harat M. Habab, as he usually says his introduction, asks you to get pen, paper, or however you want to record notes for this session today. Take things that you don't understand or not clear, go away, take them to the internet, the science books, astronomy books, whatever the case may be, and put them to the test so that you become part of the learning process of Wu-Sabat. Now we're going to do a short introduction to I was a bit late and then we need to get into a number of different things today. So who is the master teacher? I think that's an important question. So we're talking about Dr. Malachi Z York Okran, born in Ghana, 26th of June 1945, specifically Takoradi in Ghana, which is a coastal city. And he was born to Mary Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, also known as Fatima. Obviously, her birth dates and crossing dates are shown there above. So we are a matriarchal culture, going back to what we always have been and were. Patriarchal or patriarchy came in with the extraterrestrials, who are the deities of the Bible, known as the Anunnaki. So that switch came in as a result of that. But the forces of nature, through something referred to as precession of the equinox, are changing that energy back to, as I say, a feminine energy or matriarchal lordship. So Fatima, as the mother of Dr. Malachi Z York, is part of that transformational change, and this is her in the her clan mother attire as a royal highness. So we have clan mothers in terms of our rulership, part of our tribal aspect of us as Yamasee and Native Americans, as part of that as well. So you see in our clan mother attire there. So in traditional, I suppose, style, the matrilineal or matriarchal lineage was passed on then to her daughter. So the current clan mother is Kimamta Mutpataret Atumbreye, who is her daughter. So again, restoring back those traditions of the Kedem Mukmatu, the ancient Egyptians, where we find ourselves culturally our highest, or one of the highest that we've ever been on this planet, at least. Now, his father was Al-Hadi Abdul Rahman Al-Mahdi, and I keep saying this, but we will need to do a class, I think, at some point, where the Akasha records, maybe going into his side of the family, or the side, the Sayyid side of the family, in a lot more maybe detail, just to tie that in. But if people want the history, this is a very good book to get, actual facts, the guidance on that side. So he's the grandson of the Muhammad Ahmad al-Mahdi of the Sudan. Let's say a master spiritualist and Karama, very famous in the should be famous in the Islamic world, more famous, I suppose, in the world. Another black man, I suppose, not getting the credit that he's deserved because his freckles are too close, but a very serious individual and certainly worth reading up upon. So this is the master teacher at age 25, and as I say, you don't see indigenous people such as ourselves digging up the bones of our ancestors to find out about our past and who we are. Generally speaking, I'm not saying to say we've never done it, but generally speaking, you don't see indigenous people around the world doing that, and this is because we have a different system of how our story gets renewed. So that's renewal of that system is referred to as outformation. So when you talk about outformation, you're talking about things coming outside in. Information, generally speaking, pertains to things on earth, And then obviously beneath the seas you have beneath formation, understood. So our way of renewing our story is always from above. We are animists, so that is the viewpoint that we come from an energy state first, or we descend from the soul force first, so energy before we became material. And in the case of the master teacher in ancient Egypt, that being was known as an also known as Tahuti, probably more popularly the name, and basically our story has to be renewed every 24,000 years, and the way in which they do that is obviously they create a vessel or a vehicle. That's what Ba'h Yaanuwn is. Hindus have different names they refer to as an avatar. In Islam they say Ilamuta Jasid. So it's a vehicle or a vessel that allows our ancestors to speak through. And that may sound crazy and certainly out there, but the reality is a lot of things in our culture sound out there. But we have to get back and accept the reality of who and what we are as supreme beings who have forgotten who they are and take our place once again rightfully as the caretakers not only of this planet, but also fulfill our own ascension pathway to become who we are. And the assistance incarnate to help us was between, the official opening, I suppose, of the organisation 1970 at 25 was the in-housing of a being by the name of El Khadir. I suppose the proof of who he is in the work, so you can only judge it, I suppose, by the books that have been released, multiple language speaking, say, and the type of information, as I say, that really is transformative. But you have to get in there to prove it. As he says, don't believe me, check it out. And that's certainly that mantra is certainly a creed and code that we live by. Do you understand? Because it's not about belief. Yeah, belief is ignorance. It's acceptance of things that you don't know to be true. So this is the new spirituality in this day and time is factual information. However, because the lens of how we've lived, particularly in the West, and been raised up in the Western Hemisphere, we basically had to live life and seen life in existence through the lens of a Caucasian male. That's keeping it 100% real. You understand? So we've lived life through their imagination, whether it be television or their religious books, etc. That's how we've lived life. So, and we've never questioned many of the things that we've been taught. So clearly, when someone of our own colour comes and tries to teach us about some kind of alternative, we want to fight against it, because that's what, unfortunately, him or them being in our genes programs us to do. Do you understand? So we should question everything, as well as obviously test, show and prove. Our doctrine says something that you know, it's not something that you believe. You understand? So part of that process is the way in which, as I say, we or our ancestors choose to have conveyed information to us as their children in this day and time. So the first combination was Isa al-Mahdi and El Khadir as the incarnated master, and housed inside in order to, as I say, through his pen and through his works in terms of teaching, raise us or seek to transform us back from mortals into deities. Now, from 2006, after we had mastered the various different religious degrees, it was time now for to take us now into our stuff. So from really that kind of understanding, moving into an overstanding, introduction, more of us, as I say, learning about our culture and our stuff, and that required a new combination, let's say, of Dr. Malachi Z, Dr.York, our crown, being housed by the one known as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, and this is where we find ourselves in to bring in the new information, actual facts, Partarak, master secrets, so which we are now in learning our culture. Really, as part of that second half an hour. So the two half an hours, excuse me, first half an hour 1970 to the year 2000, and then the second half an hour is the year 2000 to 2030. You understand? So hereafter, that's what it's called, because hereafter, yeah, inverted commas, the devil's rule ended, but it was the rulership, the 6,000-year rulership of the Mukasu, or the Caucasian seed. They had a certain time to rule, as given them to their extraterrestrial overlords, interpreted of gods, lords, Allah, so on and so forth, many different names given in the religious books. And so they were given a certain period to rule, and that time came to an end. Slightly before the year 2000, and so it's hereafter their rulership ended, and now we're in that hereafter doctrine, so to speak, and so that new combination was necessary to prepare us for the new cycle information. And then post 2012, which we'll touch upon today and get into more in part 2, you get into the thereafter, you understand? So the rise back of feminine rulership, once again, is a period referred to as the thereafter. Understood? So, generally I tend to go on too long with the introduction, so I'm going to shorten it for this one and get right into what we need to be speaking about today, because we've got a lot to cover. Any questions so far?
No questions from me.
Well, before you start, there is a question here. It's actually not related to the class you're doing today, but the question's from Peter, and it says, Rahub Zamal, this is Amakukek. What is the difference between lizard beings, dragons, and serpents, please?
Yeah, that's going to probably take us away from where we need to be today. The book that I would refer you to is called Proverbs of Yaanuwn. So probably the Proverbs of Yaanuwn, and also the Proverbs of Yaanuwn. There's one other which I can't think at the moment in my head. Just bear with me. Yeah, probably Proverbs of Yaanuwn and the 9. So for that, you've got a breakdown of, let's say, different extraterrestrials in that book. Yeah, so in that side, you can look at that. Also, Holy Tablet, chapter 1. You can look at the 2 types, well, as it relates to this planet anyway. You can look at the 2 types of beings in Holy Tablets, chapter 1, if you don't have some of the newer scrolls as well. Okay, any other questions?
No, there are no further questions here.
Okay, let's get into it. So we're going to do, I suppose, get a bit of an understanding of time for part 1 today. In the next class, we'll get more technical in terms of going more into lost records of time, and we'll deal with conjunctions and understanding about that, and I suppose how the records in more detail, I suppose, got lost. And then if either in part 2 or 3, then we'll spend some more time or going into detail about the Tulli Papyrus, do you understand, and how that relates to what we're talking about, how those 2 things are connected together. Okay, so one of the things that you may not realise, that interesting enough, or an interesting observation for Sabians and just maybe people joining us for the first time, is that the Master Teacher has, interesting enough, I suppose, in the right, I suppose, is more overtly, to the left is maybe less so, made this correlation between the language, or our new language that we're seeking to learn and establish our culture. Today it's known as Musbatu, or Musbatia, excuse me. Musbatu is the people. And basically, the language and time. Now, there's an interesting movie that he said to watch, which maybe some of you have seen. I won't spoil it. I won't give a lot of spoilers about it. It's called The Arrival, or Arrival, I suppose it's called Arrival, not The Arrival, but Arrival. So it's a useful watch. I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but what I would say is that it's about language in that movie. understand? So, and how it, I suppose, pins into our understanding of the world around us, isn't it? Because we interact, or certainly when we were given the ability to speak through the FOX2 Pro gene on the 7th chromosome, it gives us an extra ability, isn't it, to interpret not only the world around us, but obviously to interact with each other. And the science of Wu-Sabat, which is dealing with, as I say, factual information, is the spiritual science or esoteric science, which is supposed to unify us as Nadu or black people all around the world. Different races have their own spiritual science, and our spiritual science, as I say, its primary purpose, sometimes we do kind of forget that, but it was to unify us mentally. Do you understand? That's why we're dealing with factual information, because a fact is a fact. And so it's not truth. Truth can sometimes be subjective, you understood, to the environment or context which it's being delivered from, but facts are facts. And so if we're able to agree mentally, then the physical unity will follow. And so one of the reasons why people may claim that some races are more unified than we are is because most of the time they're of the same religious faith, do you understand? In some way, shape or form, do you understand? Even if it's just, they may have different sects between them and argue between them, but broadly speaking, they may be able to agree on a certain level that a person's a Christian, a person's a Muslim, or a person's a Jew, on a certain level, especially when it comes to working together or business. Now, we're in everybody else's stuff, so it causes a lot of problems like disunity amongst us, because we're under a spell, suffering from a mental disease, as I say, that was cast upon our people, which the master teacher, obviously, for the last 50 plus years has been breaking down. And Sabaeans are still under that spell, despite obviously all the medicine in the form of actual facts, Paterak, and master secrets that we've been given. So it's a constant thing, obviously, that we must work on. And so the books are obviously a key part of, you re-adding that which was lost. So there's a correlation, as I say, between the language and time. I'm going to explore that, as I say, a little bit in the structure of how things are set up at the moment. Now, one of the things that's happened in us, I suppose, being under the spell, you understand the first aspect of it, the spell of a man in ancient Egypt was amnesia, the spell of Kingu, which was the second aspect of it, dealing with Sumeria, was the spell of religion, and then the third aspect of it, which is called the spell of Leviathan, is dealing with the spell of money, or the love of money. And so three aspects of the spell. So that one way, obviously, we've forgotten who we are. I don't know we built the pyramids and how we did it. In the same, I don't know which the good herbs or the bad herbs, etc. We're not in tune with natural nature, and particularly in the Western Hemisphere. Many of what they've done is they've put themselves between us and nature. Understood? So many of the things which we consider to be artificial or arguably unnatural are putting a barrier between us and the forces of nature, or the energy derived, as say, from the environment. And one of the things that you see, which is quite clear, where there's a disconnect, is between us and the cosmos. So we're no longer really paying much attention to what is taking place outside of the earth and how it then affects us here on the earth. Now, most people know about, or they think they know about star signs, which we're going to get into that in part 2 and debunk that. So if you feel a certain way about your star sign, then toughen up when we get to part 2, because we're going to put that one to bed. Now, when we showed you a video, albeit it was some time ago, maybe about 6 to 8 weeks ago, called Cosmic Africa. Yeah, and so we were leaning you back into, say, a very rare DVD, but you can get it, but it's very rare to get hold of. And what the filmmaker was doing was comparing modern day astronomy, so because he's an astronomer, modern day astronomy with some of the ancient tribes in Africa and how they're still connected to the stars. So the Sands people in South Africa, the Dogon in Mali, and many others feature in this video, and it's a very interesting look, as I say, at what some consider to be primitive, but remember, primitive is from the word prime, it means first or best, understood, but very primitive, simple living, but in tune with the environment, in tune with natural nature, in this case showing obviously in tune with the cosmos. So we were aligned or part of real stars, and obviously it's a star map that we're going to explore probably in part 3 from the tomb of Senen Mut. And it shows, obviously you can see here, us tracking and I suppose paying attention and incorporating stars into our life, into our culture, into our environment, into our livelihoods, etc., because we were the terrestrial incarnation of the sun. We are suns. We breathe in, let's say, oxygen, and we breathe out carbon dioxide. We have a sun, or a concentrated sun inside of us, referred to as our solar plexus, 6 to 7 inches above one's navel. Understood? Yeah, so we are the terrestrial representation of the sun, hence why they have the word ancestor or salafu in the Sabatic language, and we're referred to as their descendants because we descended down from this energy state to materialize, obviously, here into the physical. Understood? So, and our perception of who our deities were was that they were sons. Yeah, Panatharu, which basically means overseers. Yeah, they are sons. Yeah, so that's our perception. When we're visualizing, because that's one of the things they took away from us, is they made God invisible. Understood? But when we look at what is tangible to us, the perception of that is that they are sons. Understood? Yeah, just like the 193 million miles away, they are suns. Yeah, so that's what we are perceiving and looking at. Suns are intelligent, thinking, feeling beings. Understood? And we are that. Understood? So effectively, they laid out a pathway when they had no longer need for the material body of how, as I say, we would then being obviously older than us, as if you imagine us being in the terms of the concept of children, then being older than us, we being their descendants, well, they know the pathway to navigate out of the physical and transform ourselves from physical beings back into etheric or energy beings once again. And so they've laid that pathway out for us, as other extraterrestrials have laid the ascension pathway out for their children of how to make it out of this particular domain. And so that requires us to master clearly 360 degrees of what one would refer to as physical knowledge and 360 degrees of esoteric or spiritual knowledge to become 720 again. And so in this environment or school referred to as Pataha in the center, or Pataha or Itanun, planet Earth. Now, that knowledge of the stars, let's say, has been replaced, arguably, by the media, and many people today are into fake stars in the sand, or what they call superstars. That could be music, the screen, in terms of movies, television, so on and so forth. And with the reality TV, this has become, I suppose, even more prominent or addictive, where people are living vicariously through somebody else's life. You understand? So, it's easy to get caught up in potentially wasting time living somebody else's life, where you could be putting that same time into fixing the problems in your own life, and maybe then you get to live the life they're living. Do you understand? But through the television, this is what happens. It creates this allure, you understand, or pulls you in, where, as I say, your time or soul is engaged in in maybe too much time. That's not to say don't watch entertainment or don't be entertained, whatever the case may be. But you don't want to become a fanatic connected to that type of thing. So they have us putting our energy into fake stars, and we derive nothing from it. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's idleness, a form of idleness or idol worship. And it's not idol as in IDOL, but IDLE, idol worship, because you get nothing from it. You understand? If our focus is on real stars, we are deriving energy, if we have a level of focus, cosmic energy, every moment, every waking moment of our being. Do you understand? If we're outside, etc., we're receiving that energy. But obviously, are we interpreting it correctly? Are we using it? Are we in the right place on the planet to optimize it? So on and so forth. Do you see what I'm saying? So otherwise, it's not giving us the necessary things that we need. So we've put ourselves worshipping fake stars. Understood? And then the new aspect, which maybe even replace that, the control of Hollywood to some degree, is the social media influence. As you see from the infographic here, we can see, isn't it, that kind of pull of social media, especially not just for young people, but more so is how they react. And certainly a lot of people made a lot of money in this field, and that's the new kind of Hollywood star without Hollywood, concerned in that regard. Now, when you look at the word, if you say the word influencer and then you say the word influenza, it's an influenza. They sound very close. Very close phonetically. Influenza. Now, one may perceive that influenza is the flu and a virus, which would be correct. But when we look at it in etymology and see the word, we see, yes, it does, or is associated with the disease, but its original meaning was visitation, influence of the stars. Do you see? So even the word, as say, influence, you can see, even in the language, you can see it's talking about things coming from outside in. So outformation, understood, coming to us in the form of information in order to transform us. Understood? Because we're supposed to be transforming into something, and we're supposed to be perfecting ourselves, as incarnated supreme beings on this planet. We're supposed to be perfecting ourselves, reaching that stage of perfection. So they say no one's perfect. Well, yes, that may be true, but you should be working towards perfection, and that's why you're here. So you can see quite clearly how, as I say, this society has made us, as you see from the title, ignorant of the cosmos. It's put a barrier between us and reality, the reality of who we come from. The earth was birthed from the sun, understood? And we ourselves have a direct connection to the sun through one of our souls, which we have two. Now, as I say, and we have the same characteristics, as I say, of the planet, and we have the same characteristics of the sun. So as I say, we are a terrestrial representation of that, and we should derive energy from the sun. The sun is our, not just our friend, it's our family. Understood? For other people, that's not the case. Understood? And so when you live in the image and after the likeness of somebody else, the sun may not be their friend. And so their culture is then basically geared to optimize them. And so if that culture doesn't acknowledge the sun, or, for example, has you as an Nadu Negroid thinking that you need sun cream, for example, then obviously, yes, it may protect you from the UV rays of the suns, but your body is designed to deal with that. Your body is designed to transform those rays if your melanin is obviously acting or behaving as it should do. And some people have been born in the West Indies, so the Caribbean, and Africa, many years they didn't have any sun cream. Understood? So then why all of a sudden do we need it? It's because we've been eating the foods that they eat. You understand? Somebody tells, well, you need to have it because they don't want to acknowledge melanin in their culture in any meaningful way because they don't have an abundance of it. So therefore, they don't care to teach anybody else about its importance and how it relates to the sun, because the sun is their enemy. Let's just put it straight like that. They love the sun, but the sun doesn't love them, and they hate us because obviously our extraterrestrial ancestors put things in place to optimize us, obviously, for the environment. Understood? So, unaligned, untuned with the cosmos. This is the one of the challenges we're facing, which is obviously why the Son of Righteousness, as they call it in their Bible, but the Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, obviously is coming to set the record straight for us. So we talk about lost, and let's pick up maybe some of the words in that regard. So from an etymological point of view, we see that it means defeated, wasted, spent, no longer to be found. I think this is probably correlate to what we know the meaning of it to be. Talk about records, testimony committed to writing, so that's interesting. To record, mean a written account of some event. Disc, on which sounds or images have been recorded. So to them, I suppose records, or at least as the language is obviously recording in some form of, arguably some form of data sense, and writing down is the earliest record, understood. But this means something different to us, clearly, do you understand? But, their history really started, as I say, when they started to write things down. So Gutenberg obviously is a key person for them, because that's the inventor of the printing press. And so their history of story started when they wrote things down, but it's not the same for us in terms of records. Now, I'm going to touch into that in a second. So time now, when we look at time, we see we've got two versions of time, so with the same sound, however. One is a verb and one is a noun. Yeah, so we can see here to happen before from the noun version, and then you see to appoint a time. That doesn't help us in time, but here it just says of an action, which is interesting. So it says of an action. Record of time, again, tends the same thing. When we look at the noun, it says limited space of time, time, proper time, here to divide, and then here we get an abstract sort of definition, time as an indefinite continuous duration. So again, we see the ION there denoting action. And it's got here a single word denoting time as an extent or point. Maybe that's a bit closer to what we may think about it. So the issue of time, I suppose, being an action is problematic in Wu-Sabat. Understood? So time is not an action, and we need to explore that in some detail to get some proper understanding of that. And it certainly doesn't relate to the movement of a hand around the clock. So this is illusionary thinking, and as I say, causes a lot of problems when we're trying to understand basic sort of fundamental questions of where we came from, how we got here, so on and so forth. And asking certain questions like how old or how long something was, or when did this happen? Do you understand? When sometimes, if once we understand time, that question is I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but is the answer that you're being given meaningful? You understand? When you really understand how time, at least by way of the time, how things are being calculated. Do you understand? Because let's say, for example, we're looking at things from the planet Earth's perspective. The moment you step out of the planet Earth and you went to Mars, for example, the calculation for an hour, or and even the measurements on that particular planet are going to be completely different. You understand? So, a minute on Mars is not the same as a minute on Earth. An hour on Mars is not the same. A meter or a centimeter on that planet is not going to be the same as soon as you step out of this environment. So we need to understand that in some context to know what we're talking about. You understand? Because we might say, well, how long was this or how long was that? Well, you understand? Well, if the planet didn't exist, what are you calculating it on? You understand? If somebody says something happened, I don't know, 10 billion years ago, for example, if the planet wasn't here, what are you basing that calculation on? You see what I'm saying? So, because your perception or our perception on this planet of a year is one thing. So someone says, oh, it happened 10 billion years ago. Well, was the planet here 10 billion years ago for that to be meaningful or relevant to what we're talking about? But we'll get into that to make that make a bit more sense. Now, when we talk about lost records, well, one of the ways in which the records have been lost is pointed out in these particular sets of slides. Yeah. Now, in verse 1 of Lost Records of Time, very poignant verse, it says, "You must study the skies to know the action of time on earth." It does not say you must study the skies to know the time. It says you must study the skies to know the action of time. So here it's separating the fact that time is not a emotional event. Action is within time. Action is not time. And time is definitely not money. You understand? They say time is money. No, it isn't. Time is. You understand? But to know the action of time here on earth, so to understand the context of things growing and things declining, then we need to study the skies in order to understand that. You understand? We're not going to go into Numbers 23, 22, we're going to do that in part 2. But some of us, you've seen this class before, when we look at the center of their zodiac, we see a sun and a moon, etc. And we look at another example, we see nothing in the center. Then we look at our center of the Dendora star map, which so we will study in future classes, not this part 1 today in detail. But we see the hippopotamus, and we've broken this down to you all before, so we won't study in too much detail. But there's a an actual fact referred to as the quality. I urge you to go and get a copy of it and read it to understand certain concepts. So certain things in Wu-Sabat you need to master. Understand? New, intimate, existing. Certain concepts you need to master. I see a lot of people still on Revelations, still on the Holy Tablets, still on various old stuff or whatever. Some of these actual facts have been out for over a decade. Do you understand? Some of them, some of them 15, 16 years. Yeah, so arguably the Master Teacher is currently incarcerated. When he comes out, if you've been around that long, arguably you should have locked down certain principles so that when he's ready to go and take it to that next level, somebody's not asking him, what does such and such mean in the Bible? Or what does such and such mean in the Quran? Or what does such and such mean in the Torah, or whatever the case may be? In fact, the young people don't even need to read that stuff. The reason why we get into it is because obviously new people, a lot of our people still into it mindset wise, and so obviously each one teach one type of thing for the benefit of the race. We've got a responsibility to teach, pull people up, because obviously we were the ones that in a lot of cases. But some of the new people, some of the young people I suppose, are not necessarily in that thing. So it's not a case of putting them back under it and to take them back out of it. We use it as necessary, but there's a lot to know about ourselves which we need to get into. So certain concepts need to be locked down in Wu-Sabat, and so we need to start respecting our own culture, understood? And because a lot of stuff's been written, you have to be mindful that you don't get stuck in a certain part of the doctrine because you're stagnated or you're unwilling to expand, you understand, because your perception or it's new or it's difficult to learn, do you understand, things of that nature, understood? Now, some people may think, okay, well, I'm just in tune with the universe around me and I'm receiving the rays and inspiration and so on and so forth. This is not Wu-Sabat. Yeah? In Ultimate Reality, verse 77, it says, inspiration and revelations are attributes of reasoning and must always be verified against actual facts. So all Sabians should be bookworms. All Sabians should be bookworms. You're going to hear things in this class today which you need to go back to the science books, you need to go on YouTube, whatever, and basically master these things and take your head, because your head's going to fry with some of this stuff. And if you don't study, you're not going to understand it. You understand? It's not there to trick you. That's one thing with Wu-Sabat and what the master is right. It's there to be mastered. It is there to teach you. It is there to transform you. But you have to put yourself in the position to master it. That's not to say spiritual practice is not important. I'm saying you need to be master your spiritual practice. You need to master your study. You understand? You need to master business. You need to master divine love and be in service of others. You need to be holistic. You need to master everything. It's not about being one or the other or separating. That's the illusionary opposites that the Mukasu has always taught us in a mindset. No, we're circular in our thinking. Do you understand? So you need to be holistic and you need to treat Wu-Sabat like you're in university, because you are in university, the real university where you learn about the universe. So that's how you need to apply it. It's not a religion. You understand? And our generations now need to take these books and make it part of our being, so that when the children are born into the future, understood, they can take it to the next level, because it's a part of that morphogenetic field and matrix, and people are being born in that Sabian mindset. Now, so the records were lost, and so here the quality principle shows you the hippopotamus, obviously at the center of the zodiac, and the word Torah, as you can see there in the bottom of the slide, comes from the word Papyrus. That's where they stole it from. You understand? The Greeks called Zodiacus. You understand? One of our Egyptian Tamarian ancestors. So the hippopotamus is symbolic, as you see there, as a pregnant woman, but it's also mammals who are also reptilians, understood, because a hippopotamus can hold its breath under the water. It's the longest mammal that can do that in the world, hold its breath for the longest as a mammal, and it introduces the 4-in-1 principle. So we have triad principles, 4-in-1. So remember, we are factologists, we are ontologists, so we're interested in the essence or the root of the thing, and we are numerologists, so we're interested in numbers, at least from our perspective, from our culture. So the 4-in-1 principle is the quality being, isn't it? A woman can be a grandmother, a daughter, a mother, and a female. 4-in-1, understood principle there. Yeah, and that's what you see showing Tauret there with 4 toes. Yeah, quality. And ties into the all, so it's a good actual fact to go and read if you're male or female. Now, so this is basically one of the things that's taken away. So you can see in there recording or astrology in the sun, and in our, I suppose, solar biology and astronomy, the woman is at the center. They removed it. So one of the ways in which the records got lost, the Sajalat got lost, is because they're removing the woman. The woman obviously holds the records, the mitochondrial DNA, which is the records of our race. Understand who and what we are. And as we get more into this class, and definitely into Tulli Papyrus, you can see the importance of that, the importance of why you have to have a daughter if you want to carry on your lineage or lineage. Understood? And so they remove that. And so that's one of the ways in which the records got lost. Understood? Now, a precursor to this book, we may touch on a little bit in part 2, but for those who want to jump ahead a little bit, is a book called Birth of Religion. Understand? Another actual facts. Yeah, Birth of Religion, very important. One of the very early ones released, might have been even one of the first. Yeah, actual fact number 16. So birth of religion is very important. So we're going to be touching upon how the records got messed up and lost. But one of the ways is the removal of the female, because obviously that's the record keeper, isn't it? That's the one who holds the records, and you see it removed, isn't it, in monotheistic religion, where they say their God is neutral. They say their Allah is neutral gender, but they assign a he to it. They assign a he to it, and refer to God as he. Understood? So that patriarch thinking it removed us from reality. As I say, we said many of these classes before, and actual fact number 19, who is God, male or female. Very important, again, actual fact to master and to know, because, as I say, it is the woman who has proven, without a shadow of a doubt, when she's pregnant, that another person outside of themselves exists. So sometimes you hear people talking about, hey, might be some kind of simulation, or some kind of, what we're looking at is not real, we're in some kind of simulation or whatever. And that's because we understand how our eyes work, isn't it? Reflection and projection classes, and that actual fact taught us that we're looking inwardly, we're not looking outwardly. So we're looking at the brain is a three-dimensional holographic computer, and we're taking information back in from a light source back on into the brain, and using our senses we generate a three-dimensional holographic picture, which we then project outwards. So reflection, because the information is coming in, and then we project our interpretation of the world back outwards. You understand? But nobody can feel the same way about somebody else the way they feel about themselves. It's all about you to you. You are the center of the universe, etc., and you are the center of things. Everything is equidistant to you. Understood? But the woman has felt that, you understand, about another human being. When she carries a child in the womb, she feels that the way the child feels about itself, she feels that. You understand? So outside of herself, she has proven the existence of another human being outside of her own mental thinking or perception. She has proven that because she's carried that, she's felt the individual, and therefore proven that somebody else outside of her own perception exists. And that's thus proves reality, that there is other. You understand? Because remember, in their religions, they keep talking about the oneness of Allah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah? The oneness of Allah, the oneness of God. They even call it monotheism in that regard. But if Allah is one, you understand? Or if Allah is alone, why do you have to keep saying it all the time? You understand? This is what the Master's expressing. Yeah, why do you have to keep saying it all the time? If he's alone, why do you keep saying it? Because the reason I have to keep saying it is because you have to remind yourself there is others. But you want the focus to be on that Allah, whoever that is. You understand? So, and the same thing with, God. And so obviously Exodus tells you that I am a jealous God, do not worship any other gods above me. So it's proven that there are other gods out there, at least if they are following the Torah. And if you're Muslim, you claim to follow the Torah. So there's other gods out there, more than one. Many Allahs, many gods, or Elohim, so on and so forth. So the messed upness of all of that, as I say, is all from the male's mind. You understand? Because the male could not prove reality, so therefore has to speculate on what that is, what happens after death, what's out there in space, where is God, so on and so forth. So the women are not the ones who wrote the religious books, which cause all the racism, all the different types of isms, separation. Do you understand? Wars, how many wars on the planet have religious dogmas caused, you understand, or religious fighting between different sects, different religions. How many people have died as a result of religious, wars on this planet? You understand? So the good book has a lot of bad things in it, and that's the manifestation that we see in the world around us. You understand? The things of the so-called good book. You Is that because people have read it and then internalized it, and that's what they're now projecting out of it? You understand? Where did we learn about murder and rape? We learned it, if you were reading it from a young age, you read that in the Bible, you understand, or the Quran and these different types of books, so-called good books. So the reality of the situation is that men are the ones, or it's a manifestation, these are the Caucasians' mindset, obviously, which we're reading about in their books, their imagination, man's imagination, because he's not in touch with reality. And these things, as I say, they help to break, as I say, the spell that we find ourselves under. So we're going to go into this, or you should be able to break this down, hopefully, by the end of the time we finished these classes. But if just to note, you see there's four big areas here, sizable areas, and we see 4 again in there. But it's like a 2-for-1 situation, and we're going to get into that as we step through these classes here. Yeah, so here, I say that's the real zodiac, to us, we use the word zodiac usually, but star map is a better way to describe it. And here, as I say, you see the removal of the female from the centre. Here, again, important agenda seal from, actual facts 19, who is God, male or female, and you see all of the gender types in there. And so again, we're going to get into that in some detail from the hermaphrodites, and sacred feminine, sacred masculine individuals. So all that's coming from the 7 gender types, and you see Jehovah's vision there. And so again, plays an important part, at least for our understanding. Now, so a lot of that's been hijacked, a lot of controversies you've seen this week in the media about different homophobic comments and different things from people. We need to separate ourselves away from that type of thinking, understand what it means from our perspective in our culture, and what happens in natural nature, as opposed to the mindset, as I say, that many of us, I suppose, were indoctrinated with, that came from monotheism. You understand? Because, as I say, you have a 9 way of looking at things, and you have their 6 ether way of looking at things, yeah, or Nupu, which is us, and Zupu, them way of looking at things. You need to understand it from what is our perspective, to understand on these types of things, and look at it from a factual base. So we're going to explore that and look at particularly the individual known as Ma'at Ka'a Reye, you understand what they call Hatshepsut, and her role and importance, and obviously the importance of that type of being in this day and time, and their relevance, as I say, to our ascension pathway. Now, so one of the things that we have to kind of understand, I mean, we're going to get a bit deep to go, a bit, I don't know, simple is the right word, but, what is time? Because we see it's not an action. So, what is it? Now, in previous classes that we've taught about the importance of it in terms of existence, that space, matter, and time are inseparable. Understood? You cannot have one without the other when we're having a discussion about existence. Now, too often in society, we don't talk about existence, but we as sapiens do. Understood? This is why we're looking at that principle, obviously, Ma'ut, or all, understood, in that regard, because religion has people focused on creation. You understand? That's why I say creator this, creator that. But in order to create, you have to exist first, correct? So existence precedes creation, understood? And existence is in the part, obviously, or an aspect that we don't see, or at least from a perception, from our eyes' point of view. And obviously the greater ones, technology, I suppose, the more that one can see into what appears to be the mystery world, isn't it? So at one time, we can't see, for example, when inception's taking place, for example, so sperms traveling up to try and find this egg, or sperms are trying to find the egg for conception. We don't see that part. Understood? Now, but technology is allowing us to peer further and further into that journey, isn't it? One time, if you go back many hundreds of years, they were not able to detect this thing. Obviously, when you find is when the woman's body transforms, isn't it? You understand? Or when she shapeshifts, then you can tell. Understood? But we're getting further and further to the point because of technology to peer into what is taking place into the darkness. So, as Sabians understood and your reasoning abilities, you should not be ignorant of what takes place before cause and effect, because you've been wired or taught in a way to be interested or curious in the cause of cause and effect. Understood? And so oftentimes you have to be careful that we're not ignorant. Do you understand? Of certain things, certainly from a consumer mindset, or they say the best things in life, are free. They may be the best things, but do we respect it? You understand? We tend to respect the things we pay for. Understood? We don't respect the things which are free. So we have to take more time to pay attention to a lot more of the details. When you pick up a book, for example, an actual fact or whatever, whatever the case may be, somebody's taken time to put that together. Do you understand? Design the cover, put the contents together. You understand? Make sure the verse is correct. Not just all. The master teacher, of course, is his mind and his words, etc. But somebody's had to take all that and put it in a way that's, meaningful to individuals. Just because you pay money for it doesn't mean that the work and effort that's gone into it shouldn't be respected. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, for ourselves, when we're building and developing a culture, we have to take more time to show appreciation, because we have to start building back deities amongst our own culture again. You understand? So when people are appointed, whatever, to positions, and we're trying to build back stability within our culture again, we've got to grow that individual into a Ma'at again. You understand? We've got to grow the person back into a Unk Enatun. You understand? How do you know that could be your best friend, could be a sister, your brother's not that person or whatever? You understand what I'm saying? But if you're fighting down everybody and shouting down people's potential, whatever the case may be, then how are these individuals going to manifest themselves? How are we going to become that greatness again that we were back in, as I say, Kadem Muhammad or Mahmad in ancient Egypt? You understand? At highest level, we're going to have to build these things. We have to grow them. And these are different mindset, paying attention to the details. Now, Paterach, chapter number 91, is called By Way of the Time. And as I say, it does help us to understand what time is. And also it opens a doorway for us to think about that. Now, are there any questions while I move into this?
Yes, there's a question. It says, this is from Judith. It says, what is the name of this rare video about astronomy?
Cosmic Africa. That's what was on the screen. Yeah.
That's the last question for now.
That's it, yeah? Okay.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
And I think you have answered it, but there's one from Judith. There's two questions. The one from Judith says, did the ancients demonstrate time on events that happened rather than numerical dates, such as 1934, etc.?
Very good question, Judith. So we are going to explore that question. What I would say is that it's events by way of time, not because of time. Understand? So in order for time to be perceived the way we know it to be, you have to have space and you have to have matter. You understand? So you have to have that space or environment, and you need things or matter growing and declining for time to make sense. Understood? So events or incidents, you know what I mean, which we refer to as thens, within time or by way of time, is how we would develop a system. And we're going to get into that in a second. You understand? Not in a second, but as we step through, we're going to get into that to make the doctrine show us what we mean by that. Next question.
Right. It's from Peter, and I think you have answered this, but Peter has asked, do we have our own time, and who invented it?
We do have our own time. I'm laughing because we're going into that, not because of the question. So we do have our own time. Interesting one. Who invented it? I would say it was the master teacher claimed that he received the calendar that we've been given today. Yes, understood. So the way in which we are using a system, understood, to log ourselves within time, he claims to have received that directly. Now, what hopefully you're going to understand, maybe not hopefully, but you should understand, is that anyone can create a time system. Yeah, so anybody can create a system of time. It's actually fairly straightforward and simple, and even some of you probably on this call have got your own systems of time. You just don't realize it. It's just because it's not universal. You see what I'm saying? So anybody can create a system of time. You just have to understand, or particularly because you're on the planet Earth, it has to be within a certain time frame, and that time frame happens to be 24,896 miles circumference. You understood? So as long as it's in that time frame, then it's relevant to, as I say, us here on Earth. You understand? It's because it's relative. Okay, so any other questions?
No further questions.
Okay, just bear with me 1 second. My apologies, I'm back. Okay, so let's work through it. So it says, I think we have read this before, but let's work through it again. So it says, "Oh my beloved creations, Sabaeans, this you must know above all." So the word "must" is in there. Yep. "Before time is there was the first moment." Yeah. So before time is there. So we know that there, which is here, but it is, I suppose, putting it in a location. Now, time is, so this could seem contradictory in one sense, but we're going to understand that. So remember, why it's putting time in a certain location. Yes, just remember that, just in park in the back of your head, somewhere just for the moment. So before time is there, so before, was the first moment, and was dark, silent, all. 4. And in dark was born darkness, which birthed light. So when something has ness on the end of it, it is describing it that it's basically in degrees. Yeah, so there are obviously various versions of darkness, you understand? And in silent was born silent, which birthed noise. And in all, which is pa'ut, was born pa'ut, so with a definite article, the all, which birthed things. The moment to time into the second, and this grew and grew. Moment, second, minute, hour, day, week, month, year, generation. That is the ninth generator. Understood? So, moment to time into the second. So, for us, clearly, second is what it means. Do you understand? It come along second. So, where were the firsts? Do you understand? Is the obvious question. And so, this is what we're now delving into. When you talk about dark and then darkness, what is that saying? Well, that's talking about stillness, and then out of that stillness, motion came. Do you understand? And then after that motion came, we're getting things that are detectable by one's, I suppose, physical senses, isn't it? So there's a stage of motion or movement in the darkness. You understand? Dark matter, dark energy, dark matter, so on and so forth. You understand? Which then, on the other side of hydrogen, starts to now birth things which are detectable, isn't it? You understand? So we see the sun, for example, which has a birth into this dark environment, but there is a number of things that happen before, you understand, it becomes detectable to us in what we call in space and time. You understand? So again, you think about a child being born. There's a number of processes before you physically see the child, isn't it? You understand? And the child makes its presence known and felt by its first cry. Do you understand? Which is remembering the sound of the Big Bang. But there's a number of things that take place before it manifests, before it becomes detectable. Many complex processes obviously that take place, you understood, in that time. But in this system, you understood, we log, yes, that person's entry at the point of birth, not before they're born. You understand? So we're logging them and saying, hey, that's the day that you're born, that is your birthday. Understood? But that's different to when you came into existence, isn't it? Yeah? It's different when a person came into existence. Understood? As, I suppose, an individual. You understand? So that obviously times when that sperm hits that ovum. You understand? So you can see, excuse me, that within that system, yes, that a number of different events are happening, but I suppose by way of a certain individual or society's choices, they're logging it at a certain date. And so now, it's not to say that conception is not meaningful. It's meaningful to the birthing process because I suppose the clock, to some degree, starts ticking on, well, can we legally terminate? Okay, medical care needs to be provided if the person's going to keep the baby. There are things that obviously take place where a certain clock starts ticking, but it doesn't go necessarily before that. Now, the importance of us, I suppose, understanding these types of things, and certainly what the Master's been pointing to us at, is that when you understand the process of growth, then are you treating that in a reactive or a proactive way, isn't it? So, you understand? It's not everything that you have to react to. There's certain things that you could be proactive for to get a better outcome if you understand the growth process. A farmer, for example, should, if they're skilled in what they're doing, they're going to cultivate the land. You understand? They're going to prepare seeds, do certain things or whatever to make sure you get the optimum crop. Understood? It's not about reacting to the situation. Obviously, you're going to be proactive and work in conjunction with the season, so on and so forth, to get the optimum yield. You understand? Obviously, when we're thinking about that in the context of us, are we doing what's necessary to birth the optimum type of children? Do you understand? To birth star children, you understand? Which is the optimum child or output of child for our species. You understand? Or are we approaching it in a reactive way, the way we're using the environment? In a sense, these are things that we are starting now to have to think about. Now, in order to understand a little bit, we've got to revisit back this complex set of verses, but very rewarding. and just work through what we're talking about here to understand a bit more about time. So, Partarat all expanding. It says, 1, Nikum, my beloved. And if you want more, we did go through this in some detail in a set of classes dealing with natural ether energy, but we're just revisiting it just for the purpose of time here today. So, it says, 1, Nikum, my beloved, Nwap, Kharad, my being children, my jewels. Know this, all expanding. The whole, the omni, entirely, every one, not of an amount, yet one, pa'ut, all. 3, not one and all, just all, just one and just existing, not of or from. 4, pa'ut, the all, is of, is, while pa'ut is, just is. Understand? So, pa'ut is not birthed. Understand? It's always been here. You can't define it. Understand? It's whole. Understand? It's not in that context part. Understood? Because and it's not outside of it, because where would you put it? Understood? But within it, obviously things can be born or have a starting point or an origin, one might say. Do you understand? And so the all is of is. Now, those have meaning in Wu-Sabat. So when you see is of is, it has a meaning. So this is something we're going to have to look into and see what it means. It's not necessarily just an English definition of the word. It says is of is, while all is just is. 5, just as Nawab Kawan, supreme being, called Parnawat the supreme, then incarnates as the supreme being, all of unique nature at work, being. It exists as omniverse, becomes multiverses, triverses, to dual verses, onto this one universe. 7. And this incarnate universe was at one time chaos and its opposite at another time. 8. In itself a jewel as seasons, day and night, life and death of things in nature. Understood? So, we've got a number of different transformational processes or growths, in the sense of, you understand, being, becoming, became. You understand? This is one of the rules of things when we're dealing with the all. Understood? Because when we go back to what we was reading about, it said, yes, the all which birth things. Yeah, so we have to understand what things are and what takes place in relation to that and how that then relates to time. So we're going to go to Master Secret Dimensional links and we're going to deal with Nabat, Sacred Ash. And it says, Likum, Ay Mumra Najem Kharadu Shalel Wunawap. For you, my beloved star children of Wunawap, we all live by Sadadat, rules of natural nature, yet others live by laws. So you understand, yeah, we live by rules, they live by laws, but to tie themselves in, they create the rule of law. You understand? So we live by rules. Now, obviously that word I think has been interchangeable many times, but as we step back now into the reality of who we are, we're talking about rules of nature, and that's what we seek to then base our society around to optimize or complement natural nature living as opposed to being opposed to it. You understand? So we seek to work in tune, align, so on and so forth, and that's how you design your culture. And the reasons why we live are based for those reasons. And it says, and these most tauba, blessed rules of natural nature, are of kawanat existence, and by which we live. Understood? So it's telling you clearly here that it is of existence. So we're seeking to understand existence and then what takes place within that. Understood? 3. It says the Sadatat, Shalel Kawanat, rules of existence are the rules of being, becoming, and became. Yes, that's the first thing that we have to understand, yeah? And we did cover this before, but we're going back over it again. So, rules of existence, what are they? Being, becoming, became. So that's a rule of existence, yeah? The rules of nothingness to somethingness, the sum of things, you are a thing. So when we talk about nothingness, for simplistic understanding, we are talking about basically pre-elemental, isn't it? And saying things below hydrogen, the quantum world, understood? Because that's the world of things. Some things, or the first sum, at least to us and our understanding, is hydrogen. That's the first sum, understood? So you're talking about, and then for the understanding at least, that is where the material world starts from. Now, remember, the things are still matter, or they're important enough that they do matter. But the distinction between some things and nothingness is usually that distinction. So matter versus energy. So nothing does not mean non-existent. Understood? It just means it's a thing that doesn't sum up to something that can be weighed by at least modern day instrumentation. Understood? Now, it says the sum of things, you are a thing, mukwanun, a being. You of is, yeah, you are. Okay, so it's in bold, it's in big letters. So we need to understand what do we mean by is. We saw it before in Parteract or expanding. So we need to understand what is, and then what is are. Now, we get another rule. It says the rules of things. Yeah? It says the rule of things, and my beloved of things. So who was being called beloved? So beloved is talking about us, isn't it? Yeah? So the rules of things, and my beloved of things, so we are of things, are the exact same. Because all things and a thing is all existence, and existence is all things. So, interesting here. All things and a thing is all existence, and existence is all things. So, it does get a little bit tricky, but let's look at the human body for a second, yeah, which is a universe. We see that we see basically that we are, a conglomeration of many trillions of cells. Many trillions of cells. Understood? So we're looking at that as the whole, isn't it? Yeah? So we're looking at that as the whole. And saying our body is the whole. But the cell has been designed in a way, yeah, because of deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, that it contains the whole of you, understood? It's actually the whole of you as part, but it's also the same as the whole, isn't it? Yeah? So that part of you is also, do you understand, all of you. You understand? Even though the part is not whole, but they are the same thing. When you produce a child, for example, you donate a piece of yourself, which is you, correct? And that part of you is used to build another human being. You understand? In the case of a woman, there isn't even a need for fusion. She can take a part of herself, which is an egg, and use that, obviously, to clone another part of herself. So the part is the same as the whole. That's how it's been designed. Now, not for everybody, understood, but for us, that is the case, who were there from the very beginning of things, before there was even a beginning. You understand? We've always existed. So, a thing and all things is exactly the same. Do you understood? So, you have to think about, when people talk about leadership and things of that nature, well, in our system of things, where everybody's a leader, isn't it? Everybody's in charge. Everybody's got responsibility to do things. You understand? Where is the pointing of the finger in all? We've all got responsibilities. I mean, we're all doing the same thing. But we've all got responsibilities to the whole, isn't it? As an individual. Because remember, we were taught that we're judged by what? We're going to be judged as a what? As a race, not as individuals. So the individual and the race are being treated as one and the same according to the rules of things. 5. The rule of is and are. The things of is are. The purpose is of are of is. Yeah, we're going to have to unpack that. So let's hold that for a second. 6. The true and only purpose of is existence as a material thing or shakhas, person or being. So the purpose of is, or effectively for us to understand what it means, is that is purpose, and its purpose is simply to exist. You understand? 7. Material is matter, be it atoms or cells. It is to exist, to occupy, to affect by cause, to fill fasa wagat, or space and time. 11. The existence with shayanat things, which in fact is to become something in itself. 13. To hawu, create things, is the first member or part. The participle, the second member or part, is becoming from being. Let me just roll past that. And then the third member or part is triad, is part of existence, is or has become, from being to becoming to became. Understand? Which was the first rule, isn't it? That we looked at there. Now it says 16. From the prime harak or mover of things, 17. The saham power in all things together, with wagat or fasa, space and time to be. Age exists inside of time. Yeah, so we're getting an understanding of time now. 19. Time is still as space is still. 20. So in fact, all is still. 21. All has no opposite. 22. For where would it exist but as a part of all existence, who is pa'ut, or expanding. 23. And as a thing in all, you expand or grow, age and procreate. 24. Tarak, movement within stillness. 25. So you as the Kabat center are all persons, places and things. 26. Until you are moved off your center by the effects of growth. Now I'm going to just go down. It's just talking about telomeres there, and I'm going to come back to this Isavar in a second. Yeah, so it's just talking about telomeres. We're going to skip past that. It says now, obviously, we know telomeres. Excuse me, not to do that, but telomeres, for those who don't understand, obviously are on the tips of chromosomes, and basically they determine how many times cells regenerate. Understood? So each time cells regenerate, they get shorter. So basically, how long I suppose a being, or in this case human being, is gonna live for, if they're not killed or some accident or something, is obviously predetermined from birth. Understood? How long they're gonna live for, like well, we'll come on to that. Like a universe has an age, understood, from birth. Yeah, so it's a point where obviously the level to which one can expand reaches its apex, understood? And the only way it can exist further is to transform into something else, understood? So telomeres, as I say, they have a finite existence. Now it says 29, the keepers of growth, Tao dad birth in 9 months, and the keeper of time as age forwards and backwards. So we're just talking about here the process of telomeres. Now I'm just going to move forward. So 32, this is why men die first, because he has one less telomere. However, both Ayashu males and Ashashu females have been maimed and are defective from their original state of existence. 33. You all have lost the power to shapeshift completely and renew yourselves by your mafhu, that liquid gold inside, to activate your telomeres at the tips of each chromosome to in fact be born again. Understood? So this is showing that this mafkuzat, liquid gold, monatomic elements have the ability for us to regenerate, at least the physical, understood, and not be subject to telomere degradation. That's the correct pronunciation of it. 34. So as Muachahu, etheric beings exist as part of Pa'ut, all expanding. 35. Remember, each of you have Tasu Chamanu, 9 octawords, which includes Raye Atum known as the 9th. Because we've been talking about octawords, we generally speak about 8. Understood? So it's giving you that it still is 9, and then move on to 9 principles. You understand? Now, I just want to go on to this last bit here. All of this 9 principles of existence, okay, so that's the 9 aspects of us. But 38 says all of these were brought into being between 2 points, B and Bin. You understand? And here it's saying birth and death. Understood? So within, to go back to, I suppose, to Judith's question, within time, you have, you understand? We have now, clearly, isn't it? And then we have then of the past and then of the future. Understood? So the then could be classified, obviously, as the various different incidents or events, but that's all within now, isn't it? Yeah, so time is, understood? And here it says time is as of age and movement. Yeah, so again, for our understanding, we have to go back and really see what is as of. Is as of is making reference to. You understand? Because time is stillness, or that state is part of that dark, understood, that became darkness. So time is that what? Now. They say the time is now, correct? So now is that stillness, and then within things, obviously, movement happens. And by way of various events. So let's go back to this. This is of our. So what do we see? We said, okay, rules of natural nature are of existence, yeah, by which we live, and clearly this stage here, the rules of being, becoming, became. So if a thing exists, understood, the rules state is going to go through this process. Do you understand? Yeah, this is a state. This is from this state of things. It's going to go through this process: being, becoming, became. Yeah, so that's the journey that it's going to go through. Now, rules of nothingness to somethingness, the sum of things. You are a thing. Understood? You of is, you are. The rules of things we covered that are exact same, because all things, and I say a thing is all existence, and existence is all things. Now, so rules of is, of are, things of are, of is. So let's go to here and make it a bit clearer. Okay, 1 second. Right. Okay. So, just so you understand what of is, you understand. So, the nature of this is from a natural ether energy. So, the nature of is the rule. Of is the purpose, and the purpose of Fatiral Achach Nashatat, natural ether energies, is to be the prime mover in nature towards creation or disintegration, to be magnetism and magicism in organization and creation by Fatah nature, and be the main organized and controlling elements in the base or source of creation, that is the mag brain. So the nature of is the rule. So of is purpose. You understand? So what is the purpose? Well, that purpose is to exist. You understand? That purpose is to exist. What is the purpose of this existence? Well, is being, you understand? Becoming and became. You understand? So following this growth process to optimize or become that which we are supposed to be. Understood? And so, simply put, that's what it's talking about. Now, that sounds a little bit confusing, but what it's effectively saying to us is, okay, well, of his purpose, so the purpose is all things within existence, and are is what you're destined to become, from this world of things. So it's saying, well, okay, the purpose of all things is to exist, and the purpose of all things, is simply that. So the purpose of all things is to exist, and the purpose of existence, understood, is to effectively support all things. That's what it's saying. Is of our. The purpose is to exist, understand, and to support being, becoming, and became this journey. Now, it is complex, but it's also simple. You understand? Now, for us who came or come from the source of all things, understood, we were there, we are part of all. We're part of it. You understand? So when somebody talks about how old we are, or when we came around, or when we were birthed, well, we were there before time in that context. Because we were part of this world of things. All is. Understood. But as you grow, we become detectable in space and time, isn't it? Because we've manifested from the state of invisible, understood, to become visible, understand? And then at certain points of that journey, now as we are today, for example, we have become logged in space and time. But we have a link back to the ultimate source of all existence. So we are not Pa'ut, but we are Pa'ut. Understood? Because we are of the world of things. Understand? Yeah? Which is what it's saying to you here. The rules of nothing to something, the sum of things. You are a thing. Mokwanu. A being. Yeah? You of is. What is all existence. Which is made up of things. Understood? And then time, as it was saying here, is, so all existence as of, which is a purpose, age and movement. So within time, just like within existence, is motion and movement, but between 2 points. And so this is why time, it may be perceived, has an origin, because you have to have, not that you have to have, but when something is birthed, it exists by way of time. Yeah, because it has a starting point and it has a declination or an ending point. Understood? Now, what does all of that mean in the context of what we're talking about here? Well, let's go back to all expanding. So 9, it says, a dual verse of nature at work, this order called cosmos. 10, and disorder called chaos. 11, chaos is referred to as primordial chaos, nun-tat and nun, dual, from nu, omni, or source. 12, the purpose for the all in all existing as multiverses, or all as omniverse. And then 13, the universe order is one part controlled as will is controlled as choice. 14, you have 180 degrees of choice of will and 180 degrees of the other choice. You have to choose. 180 degrees and 180 degrees is 360 degrees of choice. 15, the same throughout all of nature is in this universe of dual cosmos. Now, this is where it helps us with time. 16, as in time as a point. 17, now is time. 18, and then is time. 19, yet now is between 2 thens. 20, then of the past and the then of the future. 21, so it manifests at the point of each person's now or right now. 22, and that is what I am or will do right now. What is happening by my body right now between 2 voluntary body functions and involuntary functions. So we have our conscious, the ability to move things, you understand? So that's our voluntary functions. I'm moving my hand, you can't see that on the screen, but you can move your hands right now. And obviously you have your involuntary functions, which obviously controls your heartbeat, the way your blood's moving around your body, so on and so forth. Understood? Yeah, so that's your involuntary functions. So, which is what was explained in verse 23. So, such as to blink, to breathe, and others are involuntary body functions. 24. Yet to raise one's hand, to open one's mouth, are voluntary functions, and those in between ruled by will or choice. 25. So, if the physical world has 2 actions, 2 motions, cause and effect, voluntary, involuntary functions, so it is also in the mental state and spiritual realm. 26. The mind also must have voluntary and involuntary functions. 27. You can blink when you will, or you will blink if something comes close to your eyes. 28. This is how all nature works, and in all the universe under the will of nature. 29. Nature is in control of your fate, involuntary, or that which will happen. You are just a part of all as pa'ut, the all. 30. The all is all. I am, exist. The time is now 9 o'clock, exist, and there are 2 9 o'clocks, 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. So even time has become dual or has its opposites in nature. 34. And nature is clear and emphatic matter working with time in cycles. 35. And in this universe, it is 4 6,000 year cycles or 24,000 years related to the 24,000 human chromosomes and the circumference of Kawak Taha, planet Earth, 24,000 miles equinox. Yeah, we'll just finish on this page. So it says, and 36, 24,000 years of two 12,000-year time zones of the sun crossing the equator, making night and day of equal length all parts of the earth. So Pa'ut, all is in tune, linked to time and energy. 38, birth and death in order to renew energies and powers for producing new and young universes or children, you. 39, who is the supreme being, nature unlimited in every way as a part of all, as the all is, I am. Being, becoming, became. 40, as omniverse, you are all space without need of movement or growth. Stillness. 41, all multiverses, you are all things with movement or growth. 42, as triverses, you are reaction with each other and become places. 43, as dual verses, you are separated into opposites and become opposing places. 44, as universes, you are a point in space, time, and material, and as such are in fact all time during your existence of countless supreme beings of nature, once in tune with your tone. You understand? So that universe for us, which we are right now and are part of, I'm not going to go through this, just run out of time. But that is that point, isn't it, between these two points or elements, which you understand as they're now then, isn't it? Yeah? That again, those the then and now acting as those 2 points. But even then, ironically enough, it still has those 3 parts or elements manifesting from the original source of things. But the rule of, I suppose, opposing or opposites still then remains to get this point of singularity. Understood? So time in this regard obviously has a now and is in this instance stuck between these 2 points of then. So still a triad principle there. So space, matter, and time. Understood? We're understanding time now, then, now, then. So 3 in 1. So then, now, then. This is from Lotus of Life. This particular verse, I think. Yeah. So you must understand 3 in 1. That is you. Then, now, then, or past, present, future, as space, time, and matter. Space, time, matter are one and the same. 236, as soul, body, spirit, all 3 are one. 237, birth, growth, death, all 3 are the same. So in fact, there, here, there are the same place and time. 239, up, here, down is the same. The secret of 3 as 1 and the same. Understood? So you must understand. So this is something, again, it's got that must in there. And we see, as I say, from the very origin of things, that's our starting point. I'd say origin of things, that's our starting point, isn't it? Yeah, that's what we were in that context. Yeah, so being, becoming, became is still there. Space, matter, and time, still there. Then, now, then, still there. Soul, body, spirit, still there. Even 9, when we talk about 9 principles, it's still 3 times 3, isn't it? Understand? As a principle. And it's shown even like that in the Black Book, where it shows 1, 2, 3, and it repeats 1, 2, 3, because it's within different environments. Understood? And it's repeating itself in that context. Now, we haven't finished with time. We're coming back to this point of singularity, but we're just going to look at a few of these verses here. So, 213 says these are important because the link between the mental. In fact, no, I'm going to skip this. So, 241. You are a three-dimensional being ready to experience the fourth you, or the etheric you. So, if you remember, one of the previous verses mentioned about like person, place, and thing. So nouns. So if you understand that, if you drew a diagram, I'm going to take time out to do that. But if you drew a diagram and you drew a triangle, understood, and you put person, places, and things, and then in the middle of the triangle, you put a dot and you drew a line to each of the dots in the center to create a tetrahedron shape. In the center, or the fourth aspect of self, would be the mind. You understand? So what is taking us out of person, place, and things to allow us to experience that etheric side of Sud is the mental. You understand? True thought again, not the society of multiple choices, obviously, that we're facing. Hence why one of the keys to the transformation, isn't it? Yeah, that we talked about, the correlation, is what? The language. Because the language is taking us out of person, places, and things. And to allow us to think past the physical. Understood. Now, 242. 9 to the 9th power of 9, or 999 over the power calculation in maths. 243. Know your third eye, or the pineal gland, is the center of your brain between two halves, is your gateway. Once you learn how to activate it, it produces your melatonin. The master's secret, which was the secret of your divine being. That's this next bit. 244. Master of time is the pineal gland. The Harkawats, pine cone, pine from Latin pinus, an evergreen tree with cones, needle-shaped leaves. Pineal body, Latin pinea, pine cone, a small cone-shaped body in the brain that produces a hormone. On this subject, there's much more to know. At the right time, the right ones of you only. Note, Anunnaki always hold up a pine cone. So, interesting enough. So it's telling you that that pineal gland is the master of time. Now, we definitely understand that one of the aspects of that pineal gland is that it, I suppose, links us or ensures that we are synced in to not only the universe that we're a part of, but the different, obviously, dimensions within a universe. So I suppose how one knows it's the physical plane is because the composite atoms within that physical plane all nutate, understand, or nod at exactly the same rate, understood? And the pineal gland obviously will sync itself, or can sync itself, into different nutational rates. So in higher levels of or planes of existence, it can adapt and change. Now, one of the reasons why it's challenging for us to transform is because we're not experienced. You understand? These different planes of existence to be able to sync, because we have no knowledge or prior knowledge of what it is to then correlate to. Hence why you have the incarnated Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, who incarnates and has the knowledge, obviously, of the different planes of existence. Understood? And we all, in actuality, are composed of all of the different things from the different planes of existence. But in order to transform or activate them, they need correlation. They need to be in sync. And so therefore, what was that thing? Is that you're given that example or individual that by way of touch, understood, then your body naturally then correlates to, understand, in this individual where those particles are active. Yeah, because having a soul, or when people talk about, oh, black people have soul, or the ability to dance, it's not so much that a person can or can't dance, because that's when someone's dancing out of tune, you say the person's got no soul. But it's not that they're dancing out of tune, it's one's ability to sink in with the rhythm. Do you understand? It's the ability to sink in with the rhythm. And so when we're really describing soul, you're describing that connection, do you understand? All the way back to I'll say back, but for lack of a better word, all the way back to the mental. You have that connection to where we are now, isn't it? The manifestation of the mind, obviously on the fourth plane is interpreted as the soul, obviously, and then obviously in us it becomes, the many different aspects of our 9 principles. Now, the fact of the matter is that, but you can lose that connection, can't you? You understand? But it can also be restored back again. So, at our current state of being, understood, being out of tune and out of sync, understood, we're not complete. Yeah, we're not whole, understood, and this is why you need that incarnated master, as we understand, with the 24 elders at the 19th, always at the end of the 24,000 year cycle, obviously comes and incarnates in human form to teach us, for those obviously who are ready to transform. Understood? Because as I said to you before, when we understand our story and that of our ancestors, obviously some 9 billion years ago, they'd reached the point where they no longer had need for the physical body. And they did not derive sustenance or energy from food sources. Understood? Yeah? And so they were ready to transform, clearly, which they did in an instant, out of the material into energy beings. But obviously, many of their race, or many of us at that time as part of that race, were not ready to transform. We were too material, too physical, so on and so forth, but still interlinked. You understand? So our behavior is going to affect those higher realms. Understood? So they cut, you understand, that link. Yeah, in an instant they cut that link off. Hence why there's a pathway now, an ascension pathway that we have to follow, obviously for those who are worthy, or prove themselves worthy, to be given back those secrets, again, to aid transformation. Now, here we see a good depiction of now, in the saying, all this is part of now, is that we have past, present, and future, all a part of now, do you understand? Which is what we understand to be time. Understood? Any questions?
Yes. There's a question from Anuket. It says, say again, what is the responsibilities of the telomeres?
So basically, the telomeres at the end of a person's chromosomes. So they determine how many times cells regenerate. So your body is constantly rebuilding itself. So if you basically divide your current age by 7, it will tell you how many times your body has regenerated within your lifetime. So each time they regenerate, these telomeres, they get shorter. Understood? And so there's a finite time of the physical body of how it would exist. And because men, if you look at your chromosome, men obviously have XY, we have one less strand. This is why women tend to live longer than men. But as we were reading about our mafkuzat, the monatomic elements that at one time we used to secrete in the body, like our Natharu ancestors, in the Ba'h gland, used to secrete mafkuzat into our bloodstream, and as it tells you, has the ability to renew those telomeres. So hence why we would have the ability to live longer than what those telomeres, finite amount of time for existence, is determined. So most life forms, if you do some research or study, they'll tell you that the heart is going to beat a certain amount of time, just like a car. You understand? It's going to have a life, and so the human body has a shelf life, so to speak, with existence. Your heart's going to beat a certain amount of times. You understand? Unless you obviously do things to speed up that process, but it's going to beat a certain amount of times, as is all they have a finite time before they expire. Understood? Because the natural thing is, isn't it? When you are born, what are you destined to do? When you're born, you're destined to die. So the more birth means the more death. This is why, let's say, our ancestors look at this, the life, as we would refer to it as death, and where they are in the energy state, understood, as life. Yeah, so it's in reverse. Yeah, so they say the life of light. So when that big bang happens and we're born, the light of life is cut on. But life is a burning process, isn't it? And what does fire, once it consumes its material, it's destined to burn out, isn't it? So when a person stops breathing, that effectively is it. But Mafkuzet, or our supreme aspect of us, obviously has qualities that regenerate the telomeres. Understood? So yeah, you can look that up. They're readily available. It's not difficult to find information on them. But that's what they do. They determine how many times the cell's going to regenerate in the individual, and then obviously in a wider scale you have the telomeres. And this is why they say, we talk about the Mukas or the Caucasian, they talk about them having a 6,000 year expiry date, because their ancestors put in or their extraterrestrial ancestors or overlords, those who created them, they put in an expiry date within the race in the telomeres. Understood? And then that was triggered with a number of keywords for them to expire. So by 2060, there would be no more of that type of hybrid. But some are not determined, but some have been identified to mix in with other races on the planet with stronger genes. So therefore they will survive in that way. So hybrids with dark hair and dark eyes. But there's only blonde hair, blue-eyed ones, they would expire. So there'll be no more of them left, and that's because that was programmed into their genes for an expiry date, known as telomerase. Any other questions?
Yes, there's a question from Peter. Do we really have a true age? Because when we come to Earth through the female, we are ethereal energy. So does our ether have an age?
Well, yes, it does have an age. But I suppose there are aspects of you which, as you rightly say, if you take it all the way back to that aspect of us in the world of things, then that would be ageless. But remember, it's being placed within the context of certain environments, isn't it? So we are sitting here within a universe. Do you understand? And that universe, in that context, is being placed between those 2 points. That universe has a starting point and it has an ending point, isn't it? So unless you're able to escape that particular environment, then obviously in the context of that, you're going to die with that space, unless you transform into something else. So the trick, or the way we have cheated death, clearly is our ability to transform, isn't it? So the universe, for example, from its birth date has an age of around 9 sextillion years, which is 9 and 21 zeros. Understood? But it was created around about 24 billion years ago. So you want to know its age, for example, you deduct 9 sextillion from 24 billion from 9 sextillion, which will tell you its age. So you're within that context. As, for example, the planet has an expiry date. If the planet dies and you're on the planet, unless you transform, obviously, yes, you are going to expire between those points or poles, because that's where your expiry date is. Now, we say, do we have an age? Well, we're going to transform. Are you going to transform as and be you, or the aspect of you? Or are you going to transform and just become part of existence again? So this is the aspect which we're trying to perfect of ourselves, isn't it? To be able to transform as an aspect of self, in a sense, or an intact soul, not necessarily the named individual or person, but the sum total of the experience that we've run through, obviously, in this life, which are contained or held within our soul, but not necessarily the named personality, because obviously at the point of death or shedding physical body, at least, the aspect of us which is where our character is held is discarded. Any other questions?
Yes, we have a hand up from Corinne. I'm going to unmute her and ask her to speak. Right, Corinne, you are now muted. Corinne?
Hiya. My question is, in terms of the females and there being the one who there's a lot of.
Sorry, so your line's a bit choppy. Can you just go? Can you go again?
Hear me?
Yeah, I can. That's better. That's better. Yeah.
So, in terms of the female race, and you mentioned, didn't mention in that way, but to put my own words, you mentioned about they given life, so they're literally mother of earth.
Sorry, Corey, you're gonna have to say that again because we chopped up.
Changing, you're getting more like days. Hello.
Yeah, you're sort of going in and out. So yeah, just try and ask your question again. Sorry. Yeah, I'm listening. I can be. You're a bit choppy. Yeah, you're a bit choppy.
Oh. Okay. Shall I type it in the text box?
I see. I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
All right. So, females, they're regarded as like the mother first, yeah. So obviously, they're the one who give life, the offspring. But now, it's kind of changing. Like you're getting people who probably lesbians, you're getting transgenders, you're getting people who are changing their sex. What does this mean, or what will happen in terms of, in relation to the earth?
Good question. I'm going to answer it in part. We are exploring that again further in, I think, the later parts of this class. So it's a little bit different for us. So basically, I suppose in this society, remember some of the secret societies referred to more dramatically, I suppose, as the Illuminati. You have others, the Bilderberg Group, and so on. Remember, their agenda is about population control because their, I suppose, overlords or ancestors who they're seeking to align themselves with now believe that basically the population of this planet should be around 500,000. So they consider anything above that number basically to be useless eaters or consumers. Understood? So you have producers and you have consumers. So there's been agenda through several, what they call it, alternative 1, 2, and 3 to reduce down the population of the planet. Understood? So the prevalence, one may say, of what's considered to be alternative lifestyles, or whatever the case may be, is about population control. It's got nothing to do with advancing what you may be as gay rights or whatever the case may be, and obviously what we're seeing now is sort of prevalence of transgender and things of that nature. Now, in terms of what does it mean for nature, well, nothing really insofar as nature's plan. So what it is that many, certainly within the black race, have been raised under the impression, obviously, that, you know, man shall not lie with man as if shall lie woman, and so on and so forth. But understanding that the God of the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran, interest wasn't necessarily in sexuality. His interest was about human beings stopping procreating because they were being utilized as food. And certainly you can read about that in Revelation chapter 19, verse 17. If you read that in some detail, you'd probably be shocked at what's in there. So their issue is not the fact that man is sleeping with man. It's to do with the fact that, as I say, he's not producing children in that regard. So that's why it was more frowned upon than the sexuality issue, if the Bible stories be true, because King David was homosexual, or had a homosexual relationship with Jonathan. He didn't end up getting killed or whatever the case may be. Those stories are true. Now, put the Bible to one side and let's take it back to ancient Egypt. As far as nature is concerned and nature's plan, nature doesn't really care in that regard. Now, some people are born gay or same-sex, but it's not really same-sex. So the problem is the words have not been updated because the society today doesn't understand the science that's behind it. What happens is that gender is determined as, say, 6 to 8 weeks during the birthing process. And in one sense, if a woman is stressed out during the pregnancy, it can alter the hormonal balance in the woman. And what happens is that she could birth a hormone sexual. Now, what that basically is that a hormone sexual is somebody, for example, who could be born male, but internally feels female because the chemical responses have been warped and therefore or defective, and therefore they feel female. So it's still natural, but they've been born internally they feel female. Chemically, I should say, they feel female. Just the same like a person can feel thirsty, you know, from hormones and different other emotions that are chemically driven. Understood? So what happens is that the internal, so a person's a male, for example, but internally they're female. The internal female is attracted to the external male form. Understood? Hence why you get same sex. So it's still male to female interaction. It just happens that the person internally feels male. And it's the same thing for what we're calling obviously lesbians or whatever the case may be. So it's a woman who has a physical structure, physical body of the woman, but chemically, because something went wrong in the birthing process, usually stress, say, and then chemically inside they feel male. So that internal male is attracted to the external male form. So that's one version of what they call hormone sexuals, which have arisen basically because of a defect in the birthing process, but still natural, you understand, not to be frowned upon or treated. So nature's obviously, you know, determined and allowed that to happen. You know, some creatures within nature have the ability to change their sex. So there's some are same sex at certain points and will change their sex depending on you know, the priorities for mating. But in human beings, generally speaking, that type of hormone sexual is a defect in the process, like somebody born short-sighted or something of that nature. Now, it makes the birthing process more complicated, and so I suppose the reason why it's maybe not optimized within a society is just because it carries more risk, isn't it? If you want to have a child, now you've got to bring a third party into the equation, and basically it's not, nature hasn't optimized the birthing process for that, but it happens. So, you know, it's something that has to live with. Sometimes people are born disabled, sometimes people are born short-sighted, whatever it is, it's just life, you understand? So people shouldn't be discriminated on it for that reason. Now, the issue for us is that basically, there is another group of people who, where it is not a defect, they are born hermaphrodite and hermaphrodite. You understand? So they have an extra chromosome, basically, which makes them what we would classify as neutral gender. You understand? In Wu-Sabat, the term is bathanoid. It means neutral gender. So males masculine, females feminoid, and then neutral gender beings are bathanoid. Understood? But all of them come from female. So neutral gender, birth from female. Obviously, male and female is birth from female. Now, there's a lot of people in this society claiming that they're neutral gender, but they're not neutral gender. They do not have an extra chromosome. When we talk about extra chromosome, it's not about two genitalia. That is a defect. They have the energy of over and above the normal human being because they have this extra chromosome. And basically what it is that it makes them highly spiritual, understood? Because they're able to raise their vibrational rate over and above the normal human being. So in ancient times, these people were regarded as gatekeepers, understood? And are able, as I say, to open up certain portals that allow human beings to move from this dimension to other dimensions at the right times when the planet is in certain types of alignment. Understood? Now, the issue is that because we have not really been taught well about sex in this society, and because of what you may classify as maybe, I suppose, classifies homophobic thinking, I suppose, within monotheistic religion, that these people, not knowing necessarily who and what they are, may get caught up, understood, in alternative lifestyles because they don't necessarily know who they are. They're different from a male singular gender person or female singular gender individual. So they don't know who they are, so maybe they get caught up in what they think is, you understand, that lifestyle or whatever the case may be, because the society hasn't taught them, okay, there's this, you know what I mean, neutral gender type individuals, understood? But generally speaking, they will still tend to lean more towards the, so hermaphrodite, for example, is a neutral gender being but leans more towards the female side. Hermaphrodite is neutral gender, leans more towards the male side. So some of these individuals are being born in our society, and they are necessary for the next evolutionary shift of our people. Do you understand? In terms of, I suppose, what nature determine as, you know, this dimensional shift. They're necessary. You understand? Certain times the planet gets beyond repair. These individuals are able to open up certain esoteric or spiritual gateways that allows us to shift in order for survival. Understood? So the issue is that ignorance or lack of understanding as it pertains to our culture could marginalize these individuals or send them away from our culture, etc., if there's not a place of understanding for that type of thing. So at the end of the day, it's not necessarily something you promote because it's not optimum, but it happens, so you have to make allowances and live with it, you understand, in that regard. And we don't judge people for their sexuality, they're born that way. Now there's another classification of group, just adds another complexity to it, which is basically, which is where the problem, I suppose, is in terms of society today. Because effectively, people think they know about the art of sex, but lack understanding of the science of sex. So when a person is changing or exchanging fluids with an individual, what they don't realize is that human beings are made up of 4 generations. So when you exchange fluids, even if it's just an innocent, seemingly innocent kiss, when you reverse the word kiss, you get the word sick. So the person is taking on the genes, you know, of 4 generations, understood, 30 people that we say, including yourself, taking on the genes of that individual every time they exchange fluids. So if a man or woman, let's say they sleep with, you know, 4 people or whatever, That's you know what I mean? It's 4 times 30. Understood that they're taking on board into their genetics. That's all the person's experiences, diseases, good, bad, etc. All of that is being, in the same, put into the person. Now, the problem with, if it was just about sex and it doesn't have any consequences, then I suppose people are free to do what they want to do. The problem is with the science of sex, according to the rules of nature, it carries consequences. So if the intended purpose is not to exchange genes with the person, then you shouldn't kiss them or exchange fluids. In the sense, I'm watching this Love Island stuff at the moment. You're seeing people kissing in games and all that kind of stuff. You understand? You're exchanging fluids. You understand? Now, a woman, for example, if she exchanges fluid with more than 4 different men, she can lose her soul because it interrupts her connection, because these individuals or personalities within the DNA and RNA can start to dominate the person's thinking. And so one type of instance is, for example, certain people who are not gay, they could be heterosexual or straight, for example, but they sleep with a man. Maybe that man is, let's say, for all intents and purposes, for this example, he's highly sexual. He's put himself about there. Do you understand? Seen with different women, so on and so forth. And he puts his genes now into this woman. And let's say, you know what I mean, it's the first human person she slept with. But they're not necessarily compatible, but because they're slept together, they've exchanged genes. His personality is in her. Now, if she lacks understanding that the different voices in her head, for example, are not always their own, what can happen is she's watching, I don't know, Nicki Minaj and Megan Thee Stallion, etc. And maybe they're in a video where they're kissing up and doing all kind of things together. You understand? Promoting that. And in her mind, she sees this and she thinks, wow, I might like to, I'm attracted to women now. Like this seems interesting. You understand? I'm attracted to women. Now, it might just be a fleeting thought, but maybe she goes to a club, she's out with some friends or whatever the case may be, and somebody puts it on her, drinking, whatever, boom, 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 and she tries it out. You understand? And basically, I don't know, finds herself sleeping with a woman or whatever the case would be. What she might not realize in that context is that it's not her thinking. It is the thoughts of the man that she slept with. You understand? Who is attracted to those females. But it's manifesting itself in her because she doesn't understand that not all the voices that she's hearing in her head are her own. It can work for men in the same way in reverse. You understand? I'm just using a woman as an example in this instance. So that's another way how people can become gay, through persuasion. You understand? Because it's not the person, it's the person's genes who they slept with. We see all this understanding becomes complex now when you're dealing with genetics and genes. How a person, for example, a person might try to mash up somebody's relationship internally because your ex-boyfriend is in your genes, and when you get to the new boyfriend or ex-girlfriend or whatever is in there, and they're going to try and, because they're still in you, guess who's trying to mash up the relationship? The ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend inside the person's genes, because they're still there. And it takes up to 9 years to remove foreign DNA out of the system. So what you're seeing now in this society, which is an interesting question, not just on the gay side, but it's all the way hot girl summer and all this different types of stuff, and men can do what they want, women can do what they want, women can be just go and sleep with women just like the men have been doing for years, so on and so forth, as an expression of this new female dominance, so to speak, or female rulership, or females taking control back, is because the plan is to mash up the royal genes, isn't it? Remember we talked about earlier in this class about the records and how the records got lost, and how the records are the mitochondrial DNA, which go all the way back and connect, you understand, us back to the divine. Because men don't have the link, women have the link. Because your menstrual cycle is still tied in to the 4 phases of the moon, which is referred to as, you understand, lunar biology, understood, where the cosmos is dictating, or you still have that connection to that outformation, which is having an effect on your information, or you're in a certain type of formation, or your physical body. So you still have that link. So as nature transforms and changes, it transforms the woman. The woman is then supposed to transform her man. You understand? So this is where a lot of this misuse of the sexual power, understood, is coming into play, and that's what the issue or problem is as far as nature is concerned, which is why certain diseases are obviously a lot more prevalent, etc., because it's trying to get us to be back in check, to use our powers much more responsibly if we're going to achieve higher states of evolution. So we're going to explore that in more detail, because obviously Ma'at Ka'a Rayay, or who we're going to be talking about in the Tulli Papyrus, she was a hermaphrodite pharaoh, in the sense, or ruler, Para Rayay Aha, in the sense, one of the first, not first, but one of the most successful female rulers of ancient Egypt, or ancient Telomeres. So we'll be exploring that in further parts. I hope that answers your question. If not, please ask further. Any other questions?
No further questions.
Okay, so we see that the master of time, interesting enough, excuse me, is the pineal gland. You understand? And here we see on this diagram, you can see its location right here. Boom, this is our pineal gland right here. This is why it's being referred to as the pine cone. And interesting enough, we see it in our culture in the sign of the triad. So again, another triad principle here. Understood? Yeah, 3 in 1, as Asar, Ashtat, they call Isis, and Hara, understood, Horus. And we see it there as the all-seeing eye, understood, represented by Asar there. And you see culturally, you see it there on the female, do you understand, as the Mimptar, understood? Yeah. So the Hindus, you see Hindus wear, I think they call it the bindi. But it originally came from ancient Egypt or ancient Telomeres. And men, in fact, do wear the same jewel as well, or can wear the jewel, which denotes the third eye. And so when you look in language, I've just highlighted these in black. Yeah, ta, there, and the ra, yeah, is the obviously from the root there. Excuse me, let's go back. Yeah, see the root there, patar. Yeah, so the all-seeing eye. So that pa, the ta, there, and then the ra. Yeah, there you can see that it's in that word there. Miptar. Yeah, miptar. So mi denotes a thing. You understand? So as in person, place, and things, it denotes a thing. Yeah, so the third eye jewel. You see it there represented. So this is the importance of this. And say the triad principle here, and this, well, what they call sign of the triad, is how one would greet their ancestors in a ritualistic way. Understood? So the first point is where the person, as I say, puts their fingers on the where the all-seeing eye is in that place to start the ritual. Yeah. So obviously you see here, pine cone is the depiction, as I say, or how it's depicted in a lot of different cultures in terms of this third eye. Yeah. So you see it there. Let's say Anunnaki in Sumeria, you see them holding or directing the pine cone, which represents, as I say, the pineal gland. And as you see, the pineal gland, the pine cone, I should say, produces the evergreen tree. And so that evergreen tree is not subject, as we start to get into how seasons work and so on and so forth. This growth and decline, etc., is not subject to those rules in that way. Understood? They're very similar to ourselves. Understood? There is no decline as supreme beings. We're above nature in that regard. Understood? And so it's not subject to these ups and downs. As you see, it's evergreen all the time. So its energy is maintained throughout the seasons. Understood? Excuse me. And so again, you see this third eye. Interesting enough, you see this individual is wearing a watch. Yeah, interesting observation there. So the third eye, you can see, if you pay attention, you see in a lot of iconography, and that's what it represents in different cultures. Yeah, and very important to us, as I say, as the master of time. You see not the reptilian type of Anunnaki there, but you see the ancient Sumerians, humanoid ones depicted here. And again, you see the pine cones there. Here on the courtyard of the Vatican. Yeah, so you can see it as around. This is a Masonic caduceus there. Excuse me. So this is what it represents. Yeah, this pine cones are very important for us in terms of mastery, and obviously, just in a physical sense, it produces melanin. So we talked earlier, I think, or touched upon how time becomes in a certain place or point, and so we're talking about points here of origin, and here we're showing you diagram of points of singularity. Do you understand? So this is where clearly the then, now, then, or in the case of this, where we've got order versus chaos, which, and out of that, you understand, births a point of origin for a universe, which allows obviously time to exist, and clearly within that universe, you understand, time exists obviously as a part of space and matter, which then allows things clearly to grow and also as well as decline. You understand? And that universe will have a starting point and an end point, but it's as it being birthed or being brought into existence. So here in verse 40 of Existence on Why Actual Facts 36 says parts of nature exist as units or universes, while other parts exist as chaos, dark energy, and others are calm, dark matter. Obviously, so we understand that the universe primarily is made up of, or what we don't, the existence which we don't see is clearly, I think, 76% dark energy, 24% dark matter, out of 90%, you understand, and then 10% is the visible universe. So it's associated up all existence. Yeah. So, so it says, so in fact, the parts that existed as multiverses create a universe or units in existence, meaning action is movement in and from stillness and disturbs calmness, thus giving birth to chaos. So in fact, black or darkness is calm, and light or white, bright is chaos. So out of darkness, light was created, or out of calm, chaos was in and is born. So in other words, order and disorder exist, and out of one comes forth the other. So in fact, they exist at the same time before they exist in the same place as dark matter and dark energy. So this is how, I suppose, it arises in as these points in time. This is a very interesting reading here. We've just extracted a small portion of it. It says here, the planet is 24k miles in circumference at the equator. blackness to black matter of black energy within this one universe, this immense point. So obviously a universe is a type of Big Bang, understood, not to get too complicated, but basically when the summer of existence visits certain parts of existence, it causes things that were aimless to basically start to move and be brought, in terms of a swirling motion, be brought into order. And so here it's saying this immense point is space and time. Now listen to this bit. It says, here exists Yaanuwn Tat, the invisible, and Yaanuwn, the visible. The creators grew miraculous rules of action and reaction to birth and grow worlds within worlds and without worlds, the cosmos. Understood? So in the context that we're talking about here of time, you see this again, those 2 points, isn't it? Do you understand? Excuse me. Order, chaos. You understand? Time or now. Do you understand? Here, action, reaction. Understood? And that's creating worlds, which is space, understand, place, as place, material, and then allows, as I say, time in that moment to exist, and then multiple thens obviously are going to exist within that environment, being called the universe. Understood? But interestingly, we see Yaanuwn having that counterpart, isn't it? You understand? Yaanuwn Tat. Yeah, so the invisible, the female, obviously representing clearly the darkness, and then Yaanuwn representing you understand, that visible, you understand, or form of light, not the light necessarily of they're talking about here, obviously that black light which eventually manifests itself to become suns, excuse me, and other things becoming some things. So the entire cosmos and space forms omni-adverse with none, where ether and hydrogen meet. Understood? So this is again where energy and the matter or material, obviously, you get that delineation, obviously, between energy and matter. And based on, I suppose, how we're measuring things today. The extremity of nothing becoming something, or nothing became something, with the 4 directional cardinal points within existence. Now that needs to be expanded upon. We do have 4 energies, obviously, magnetism, gravity, strong and weak nuclear forces within existence, but the master have to clarify when he's ready whether that is what he's relating to there. It says expanding from one point in space as a spark of time, which became past, present and future, and then now on, then now then, prior to this existence as things. Understood? So I think going all the way back to Judith's question, you understand, this is what's at least in the physical sense, is creating excuse me, or this is time manifesting itself in this context, being created from, as I say, when this universe, or a universe, excuse me, is formulated. Now that Yaanuwn Tat and the invisible and Yaanuwn, we're going to explore that further, because it's all to do with tones and sound, and how these two, they refer to them as the antagonistic twins, formulate this dance of growth. Do you understand? Because Wu-Sabat is dealing with sound, right, reasoning. So sound is in there, very important. And we're going to explore an Egyptian deity called Merit, where they talk about her as being the Chironomy deity. What is Chironomy? Well, Chironomy is, if you see an orchestra, it's the act where the what's the person called? I forgot the person's name, but the person who directs the orchestra, I've forgotten the title of the person.
The conductor.
Huh?
The conductor.
The conductor, thank you. When the conductor is waving their hands, understood, that is known as Chironomy, understood, and Merit, or Lady Merit, plays an important part. That's what she represents in terms of her significance in that. So it's all a divine dance of actions where there's obviously a lot of symbolism in there, but obviously as you can see, even where we've kind of read different books, it's all saying the same. They're all saying the same or similar thing in slightly different ways. Yeah. Okay, any questions?
No questions from my side.
There is a question here. It's I think it's be fair to say that it's totally off topic, but the question says, when will there be true peace on earth?
Sorry, can you speak up? I can hardly hear you. Sorry.
The question says, when will there be true peace on earth?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. When the Mukasa are removed, I think that's the starting point.
No further questions.
Okay, right. So you can see now when we talk about that point of singularity coming about in a universe where time now, if you reverse it, you get the word emit. Yeah. So obviously from that point or singularity in the formation of a universe, we see obviously birth of the sun and different things of that nature. Then it allows, doesn't it? Events to happen and then be measured by way of time. Yeah, so without the solar system, for example, as we start now to get into the detail of Earth movements, you understand, it would be difficult then to classify things by way of that type of time, or certainly where we measure it at the moment. So we're looking for external things to log certain events by, but in order to do that you need an environment that obviously that supports life and growth, you understand, became, and the universe is obviously at the early stages are part of that. Within universes we have suns give birth to planets, understood, which obviously in the case of us provide inhabitants for various different life forms, including our own, as human beings, understood. So emit, whether they understand the irony of that or not, this is obviously the reversal of time in that regard. Okay. Okay, so his story in his time. So we're going to have to, we don't have to, but we're learning the wrong way to understand the right way, let's say. Yeah. So in the society today, the planet basically, which we know is 24,896 miles, it does expand and contract in circumference, understood? And basically how they've structured their time is based on the planet, obviously turning on its axis. Now, part of the challenge is why we get time wrong, or he gets time wrong in this society, and then consequently why we are then out of tune, is because the event of rotation, which is the planet rotating on its axis, once, which we're calling, a day, you understand, which we call a day, doesn't take 24 hours. It takes 23 hours, 56 minutes and 6 seconds. So every day, this particular event, understood, is out of sync. And what happens is then every 4 years, we have to add an extra day into the calendar, referred to as a leap year, because time is not being calculated accurately, by way of the system being used. So what's happened is that they have divided the planet, into these hourly time zones, isn't it? Yeah, so we've got 0 here, yes, which is on this map is shown as prime meridian or GMT, do you understand, Greenwich Mean Time, understood? Yeah, which is a place in London. And so here, that's where the 0 is. Now, the planet is basically split, as I say, into these kind of 1,000-mile blocks, 1,024 miles, obviously to be specific, because the planet basically is turning, or moving, it's turning on its axis at a rate of 1,024 miles per hour, understood. And so they've created these time zones and say that basically, okay, well, here is 0, and if we move to the right, we're going to add 1 more hour on. So if it's 12 o'clock here, in this next time zone, it becomes 1 o'clock. Now, obviously, the issue with that is that right now, for example, the time is approaching, it's 16, so it's 4:22, and so that's the time at the moment. But we've got people on the call, for example, who are in the States, who are basically, if they're on the East Coast, are supposedly 5 hours behind. Understand? But people on the call are asking questions. Understand? Live. Understand? Or as much as live can be. And they're not 5 hours behind. So the events are not 5 hours behind what is taking place now. You see the problem? Now, the people listening to us on Facebook, for example, there is a 20-second delay. So as we're speaking at the moment, in so-called real time, they're not going to hear what I'm saying. So those of you on the Zoom platform, despite a bit of a limited technological, you understand, because of the medium, you're going to hear me slightly, after I've finished speaking. But those on Facebook, for example, are hearing this event or what I'm speaking 20 seconds behind what you're hearing on those on the Zoom platform. So there's a built-in delay. So they're not quite live. Obviously, they're hearing it. And same with normal television or things that you watch, even radio. They've got a built-in delay, which is why they're able to, when somebody goes nuts or whatever, or swears or attacks somebody, they can cut the television off or whatever, because there's a built-in delay to what's live versus what's being received. So you can see the lack of intelligence that's gone into the formulation of this system. And as I say, there's a lot of errors and mistakes in his time that have just been left and no one doesn't say anything. And obviously we've broken down previously about the months, and because we all conform to it, you understand, knowing that there's errors in there. Like, for example, next month is going to be September. The word sept means 7, but when we draw it when we represent it when we represent it by you understand, its numerological equivalent, or its number equivalent, so make it simple for yourself. Yeah, we write 9, don't we? Correct? We write 9 to represent September, as the month. But sept means 7. Obviously, October, as in octopus, means what? 8, correct? But we write it as 10. So there's already errors in the time system that we just gloss over. Yeah, because obviously the Romans, as in Julius Caesar for July and Augustus Caesar for August, they decided that the Roman system, which had originally 10 months and didn't even cover the whole year, they said, well, we need a month named after ourselves, so we're going to add in, we're going to add in our names into the month. And so they didn't change the system, which, remember, Roman system is based on decimals, isn't it? On tens. Yeah, so that's where all the mix-up started. But we haven't changed the system. We haven't changed it, just left the errors, and this is what happens in his society, but we call it proper way to do things, and it's wrong. It's wrong knowledge. Same way we're watching the Olympics right now, understood? And they have multiple heats in a semi-final. Multiple heats. I can have 4 heats in a semi-final. Semi means half. There can only be 2. Do you understand? Half is 2. So they do these things, but they leave errors and mistakes, but consider themselves to be the authority over everything. Understood? So this is where it becomes problematic, as I say. Now, you can, so I think someone was asking before about, can we create your own time system? Well, yes. So, because the time frame is 23,896 miles. That's the time frame, circumference of the planet. So, if you wanted to have 2 hours in a day, you can have 2 hours in a day. As long as they use the same time frame as that 23 hours in 896. As long as the time frame stays the same, because that's the event, isn't it? With the planet rotating on its own axis. So that's your time frame. You can split it up however you decide or want to. You understand? Hence, and this is what we're showing here with different cities. I've got different times. But if we were having a call, as I say, on Zoom, you know what I'm saying, or over to somebody in America, it wouldn't be happening 5 hours behind. You understand? It's going to be happening in the same moment. So the illusion of it is problematic. The other thing is this concept of clockwise. So clockwise giving the impression that the hand of the clock is moving in a certain direction, as if time moves in a direction. Time does not move. Now, as we read, time is still. Time is now. Within time, there is motion and movement. You understand? Where things get recorded by time. But time itself does not move. Yeah, it is stillness. Understood? So, this idea of direction. And even then, if you think about the way the Mukash done everything he does, it's gone anti-nature, because even clockwise moves in the opposite direction, as we're going to see, not only to planetary movement, planetary orbit, but also if you think about the sun, to somebody who is standing on the earth looking up, what the sun rises in the east, correct? And it sets in the west, so it appears to go in this kind of circular fashion and re-rises again. That is in a anti-clockwise or counterclockwise direction, isn't it? Do you understand? So everything he's doing is going against nature. Yeah, because obviously representing chaos. Understood? And so remember, revolution is the time that we're looking for, isn't it? Revolution versus evolution. And most people don't connect those two words together, but they are related. So evolution versus revolution. It's the two different movements around these, what they call a smacked circle, a way that we classify growth within existence. Now, so this message talking about how is time correct. This is from Nawapic grammar. So, and touched upon how you can create different systems. So, for example, we're talking about women today, but a woman, for example, because her menstrual cycle is tied into the 4 phases of the moon, some women have their menstrual cycle exactly the same date every month, you understand, without fail, you understand, and obviously they've got a situation where some people may record in a journal or a diary, whatever the case would be, when those dates are. Yeah, so you've got 2 fixed points within nature, understand? Yeah, some things where the moon is positioned in a certain place in relation to the Earth, it triggers a situation here on Earth. Understood. Now, if you were tracking your menstrual cycle against that phase of the moon, you would be able to see and know, for example, that's one way you could see and know, my menstrual cycle's come in because the moon, for example, is in a certain position, obviously, as well as obviously your internal hormones are going to start to trigger, excuse me, a number of different processes to initiate the menstrual cycle. Now, from one incident, you understand, or one then, to the next incident, you can start to use that time in between, do you understand, to plot certain things. You say, okay, boom, I've got to pay that bill 4 days after, do you understand, my menstrual cycle. You can start to track it between the the 2 points. And this is how you can set up your own different systems using natural triggers. You understand? So here, now we wouldn't use that because one is subject to a lot of variance. So obviously if you've got alpha females in a situation, sometimes females come together, they'll sync their menstrual cycle with that individual or person. You understand? And basically it's not a universal system, so it only work for that individual woman unless they was in the same cycle. So the reason why we expand to different things is because it can be seen by everybody, if people understand. Yeah. So in this instance, obviously the master teacher here is expressing about how we used the heliacal rising, of Sirius, understand, in the skies. This is an individual just use his own system to track a certain point where basically it's going to be visible in the sky at a certain point now, because once the sun basically is higher than it on the, I suppose, the horizon, its light so powerful it's going to block out the ability to look at Sirius in that way. So there's a certain point, or certain points in the year where Sirius appears in the sky. You understand? And so by tracking that event, you can basically correlate your time system to make sure it's accurate to that event, because it's going to be fairly consistent. Do you understand? And so in ancient Egypt, for example, one of the ways, for example, where we had certain events, like for example in Wu-Sabat we have our New Year ball. For some reason it's left my head, but we have obviously the Jed Festival, 26th of June, start of our new year. But then we have a festival or New Year celebration, a ball, sometimes around 27th of December. Now that event basically tied into the rising of the Orion star constellation, which would appear in the so-called night sky or shadow hour, and basically that event would trigger the flooding of the Nile, understood, which basically brought a lot of the let's call it basically the soil from the rivers, got a different name, silt or whatever, which basically nourished the farmlands and basically helped to irrigate and make the land obviously a lot more fertile. So that event was tracked obviously within a calendar, you understand? And so it happened a certain time every year. You're looking for that constellation, you understand, because the Earth is obviously rotating and it triggers a certain event. So you can build calendars around these type of events. Now, the important thing to understand is that we are talking about a system that works for a person on the surface of the planet Earth looking upwards. Yeah, so it is from an Earth perspective. The moment you step outside of this planet, those numbers, that system, all of that is going to change. Yeah, because the perspective is not the same. So these systems that we're talking about here are from somebody looking on the Earth upwards. Understood? Yeah, in that regard. So here we talk about the 361 calendar, which Tulli created. Understood? And as I say, this is based around the heliacal rising of Sirius, you understand? Or they call some called Sophis, you understand, Sirius, which is associated with the deity Aset. Now, another interesting method which is being described here, which we also use to record time, is by using different metals. And basically, the different ore of these metals, which I found, this is quite amazing, this story actually, but the different ore of these metals, obviously the fact that it was being then hit by the sun, it would give off a certain scent. So that scent, because it was would then trigger what time of day it was. And here you see that we're using platinum, steel, iron and nickel, and then copper would change colour, you understand, as the sun appeared to go down. So this was a method of using smell or scent, as well as the impact of the sun on these metals, to be able to tell what time of day it was. Now, the human nose is the original pyramid. You know that. So it's the first pyramid, which is the nose. And so smell on metal, very interesting way again of using, solar or the cosmos, solar energy in this case, or the cosmos, to trigger certain events here on Earth, and then log, obviously, time in that regard. You understand? So what is that event, or what is that time informing you to do? You understand? Which is what you say. Okay, it's morning. We're going to do X, Y, Z. Okay, it's this time. Boom, we're going to do X, Y, Z. In times where it didn't have electrical lighting, then obviously those daylight hours obviously going to be incredibly important. So these are systems which are based around nature. So certain events, and we see that obviously the incorrect time can be really problematic if we're waiting for certain key events to take place, clearly when nature is transforming. Now, things in nature don't organically happen the click of a finger at 1 o'clock, as we see babies, for example. Okay, we can predict that's going to be born on that day. Sometimes it's before, sometimes it's after. So it's by the event that happens, which clearly then triggers. When it happens, that's when the event is. It's not by some arbitrary date or time necessarily. It's by the event, how certain things get logged. But yeah, the reality of the situation is you miss a train by 1 minute, you miss a train. And you miss a train by 10 seconds, you miss a train. So if there's certain events that are taking place, we need an accurate measurement of time. We can't be, as in the day, 54 seconds out, or whatever it is. 54 seconds out. We need accurate time. Depending on what it is, you need a time system that's accurate to what the event is. So we have to have a means of calculating true time and move away from his time. His time, the reason why they leave it for certain things in error like that is so that we won't know the right place to be at the right time, where certain events that are due to aid us are to happen. And at the same time, we can't know those dates and be sharing them, because those forces who will seek to stop certain events, like we see May 8th, 2002, with the planetary alignment that was due to take place at that particular point, their thing was, hey, get this, we don't even care if he's the guy. If he is the guy, get him away from his people, get him off the streets or whatever, because certain events, they knew that planetary alignment, which is not, wasn't us who started the talk of the alignment of the planets in that regard, but certain events were to take place on that land where we built pyramids, etc. Certain spiritual transformational events were due to occur, and they was like, get this man away from his people. We don't care if I think until at least this prophetic date passes. You understand? And so this is the kind of issue, or the key is that there's no one there batting for us, in that regard, until this sort of Amanubi Rakata come around, and with the right knowledge and right type of information. Because you can see, even with us just discussing today, it's complicated. Now, we have a system of time, or our own system in time, which again is seeking to base that now around natural time. And now, here, as we expressed earlier, you can divide up I'm using the word day loosely. Do you understand? But what's being considered to be a day, or the revolution, you understand, of the planet, and so turned on its axis, so one cycle, you can divide that up into whatever segments that you feel is appropriate to your system. So in our time system, we have, as you can see on the screen, we have 38 harat, or hours, which make up the system, and then we have the halfway point, so 19 hours of Rayay time, and then 19 hours of in this case it's called set time or shadow hours, because there's no real such thing as night time, because night in Old English means the absence of light. So the sun is facing, the planet is facing the sun at a certain point, and then it's facing away from the sun at other times. So what's being called night is really shadow. So we have 38 Ha's. Now, because, as I say, we include moments, or first, we didn't come along second, he came along second, he was here first, so we include first in our time. And so, as you can see from the breakdown here, so this represents 1 Ha. 1 Ha contains 19 seconds, and 1 second contains 19 firsts. So 19 times 19 will tell you that obviously 1 hour contains 361 firsts. Understood? Now, so obviously if you're making that some kind of device or whatever, you have to understand, well, you have to be able to work out what a first is. Understood? And so clearly we see delineation of in his time a minute. So an hour, isn't it, is divide that by 60, we get a minute. Divide that by 60, we get seconds. So if we divide by 60 again, we're going to get we're going to get firsts. Understood? So as long as we understand in our system what a first is defined as in time, it can mean whatever you want it to be. Do you understand? So as long as, say, when it all totals up, you understand, it's within that same time frame of, say, the circumference of the planet, because that's the event. So it turns on its own axis. So as I say, so you see first there, and as I split up in that regard. So this is our own time system now. I'm sure not a lot of Sabians. So you need the right environment, one may argue, to living on your own land, in your own environment, in the same, to make that work correctly, really, for you in the right type of way. This is important. And so, of having your own culture, but you need the right environment, really, excuse me, to be able to live by that culture, and it to be meaningful for you, in how we do our thing, like 939, for example, is meaningful to us, because that's chant time. So that's meaningful to us in terms of our culture. But I suppose the issue for us is 9 really 9? Is 3 really 3? Is 9 really? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, is it the optimum in terms of that type of scenario or situation, because of the errors clearly in time? So you need your own time system, and somebody at least understands how it's due to work in order to work that out correctly. So so that's our sundial, and that's how basically it works in terms of first, seconds, within the context of 38 Ha's. So, for example, as soon as it reaches 38 Ha's, if the planet, for example, has not, let's say, for example, the planet hadn't quite turned one full circle, understood, the cycle would then carry on into the next cycle. So we're going to move, so if it's 138, it's going to move into the second cycle. Understand? So part of the completion of it turning may move into a second cycle. So the time flows time flows from one cycle into the other. Doesn't wait for that event to complete. Even though it's based on that event, it doesn't wait for that event to complete. So it may be, for example, that that the planet turned on its axis, and on that particular day it happened to be 39 Hadarat. 39 hours that it took, as opposed to 38. Do you understand? So the time flows, once it starts, it flows continuous. Understood? And so I suppose when the master's out, it's going to have to reset that so that we can then recalculate what the time is. So know what the year is. So because 1998 is going to be the first year, was the year 1. Yeah, it's only in 1998, so we're 23 years into the calendar, but I suppose a similar thing to know the exact starting point. So again, this is the calendar, which again is based around, so the calendar is basically read this way. So you have 19 days within a month, so you read it downwards. So we've got 1 week here, and then we've got a week with 4 days in it to make the month. So this is my kind of notes, but here, as you can see from the key, but the red and the white denote seasons. The black here denotes the solstices, so obviously summer and then winter solstice. The gold represents the midpoint in the year, and you see here 361 days in the year. We've got a midpoint, so absolute midpoint here of the year in green. Yes, so 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then a 4th week with 4 days in it to make 19. So again, understood, you can set your own calendar, and then you'd base it around, as I say, it could be the particular event. So in this instance, you could use the rising of Sirius, do you understand? Or look more widely, maybe the heliacal rising of Orion. So whatever event, it provides the calibration for you to know that, okay, my calendar is, you understand, is correctly aligned with that particular event, depending on what your time system, or depending on what, incident that you choose to use, or action, understand, that you choose to use within time. Understood. Any other questions?
Yes. We have a question here from Louise, and the question is, what books do you recommend to learn more about the Dendora and solar biology?
Good question. So I suppose the ones that we're dealing with now, really. So Birth of Religion is going to be a good one, just to understand, which we will cover probably next class. But I suppose you need to know how it got confused. I would then say Lost Records of Time, because we need to really move away from astrology. Astrology is not an accurate science, and Birth of Religion would also kind of qualify that for you. And then probably the latest one, Tulli Papyrus, is also a particularly good one as well. So those are probably around the understanding of the Dendora star map, a good one. You need to catch a class as well. It is an actual fact, but it's not released at the moment. I'm not sure when they are going to release it. It's on YouTube. It's called Gateway of the Guardians. That's a part 1 and part 2. That is particularly useful for that understanding. It is touched upon in other books as well, so you could read about that in Atlantis, so Patriarch Atlantis. And what I'd probably recommend for everybody, although it might not directly relate to what you're talking about there, but you need to understand, I suppose, the genetic side of things, is Actual Facts number 19. Who is God, female or male? Understand? Because in that there is a system in there, which we will be touching upon in these classes, which helps us to understand this 4-in-1 principle which exists in the female. So that even adds another book there, I'm giving you loads now, called The Quality. You understand? So Actual Facts, The Quality. So what have I said? Actual Facts, Birth of Religion, Lost Records of Time, the Tulli Papyrus, Patriarch Atlantis, and what was the last one I just said? Who is God, female or male? So that will help you understand the Dendora star map. If you want extra reading, although you're going to cover by this as well, Procession Change 2012. So Procession Change 2012 is all about females, the importance of females. And all of that, I suppose, is going to be helped in the context of the book called Lotus of Life. Yeah, because that is about female spirituality. And so that would help in that context. Any other questions?
Yes, we have another question from Aniket. And the question is, no disrespect. I am learning and open to receive info/affirmation. What I don't understand is the transgender, gay, and other genders being natural or normal. If we need a man and a woman to procreate, please explain a little more, please. Thanks.
Well, first of all, I didn't say transgender is natural. Like, if a person's born with one leg, it's natural. Do you understand? Yeah, it's not optimum, but it is natural. They've come through on the natural process. So what I'm saying is defects happen in nature. Transgender is the same thing I talked about, hormone sexuals, but it's just on more of an extreme. The reality is that our ancestors, Pa and Natharu, they're not interested in what a person does in their bedroom, as long as it's natural. Now, it's not natural to you if you're heterosexual to do the acts that gay people do, but to them it is. And as I say, it's still male and female. Just explain that, because the person chemically inside of them is in the concept as a male who is gay. He chemically is a female, and so something's gone wrong in the birthing process. And so it happens. People, this is why human beings have to take more care, arguably, when they're having children. You understand? Most times when they're having children, it's not planned, it's chaotic. People are working to, could be stressed out. I'm not saying they shouldn't work. I'm just saying sometimes people are stressed out in the job, having to meet bills and this, that. It's going to affect the process. It's like cooking a meal, for example. If you're not 100% focused on the task or whatever, the food might not come out perfectly. So you got to imagine it's a delicate process. We just don't respect it anymore because it's not considered precious in a lot of cases. It is obviously when the person's pregnant, but we don't set things up in a way that optimizes it. For even society, they probably live in London. The people giving up their seats and all that for pregnant women and so on and so forth. Are they really cherishing them in the way that they're supposed to be? So a lot of things can go wrong in the birthing process. Let's not get complacent because technology has made it that more people have babies that survive and do okay than are not. And so the fact of the matter is it can happen. So you get defects in the birthing process. Now, a transgender person is just an extreme of that hormone section which I'm talking about, where they can't stand to be in that body. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the reality is it happens. It happens. The Romans and gays were known homosexual societies. Now we wasn't that way inclined because, as I say, it's something that doesn't happen that often. Do you understand? So it's not a thing of, I suppose, in a society. So how we, I suppose, approach it as Sabians who are coming back now to knowledge of who and what we are, we just don't tolerate discrimination because somebody's born that way. That's who they are. It is what it is. You understand? At the end of the day, stay out of people's bedrooms. The issue is why are you concerned whether what's happening in the next person's bedroom? Do you understand? Most of the things that happen in a person's bedroom are not going to result in a child being born. So let's throw that out the window about, well, is a child going to be born? 90% of the things that take place in the bedroom, no child is going to be born. I'll tell you that straight like that. You understand? So, or the things that you enjoy, no child is going to be born. So it's not about procreation in that sense. You have to separate the art of sex from the science of sex in that regard. Now, the reason why it's not promoted is because it's not optimum. When you're coming together and you have to have a trisexual situation, Yeah, you're going to have to, there's a aspect of the process. If you want to produce a male child, for example, you're going to have to bring in a third party now into that relationship, you understand? And so is that going to optimum produce a star child in that scenario or situation? Not necessarily, because a star child is basically produced from the coming together of soulmates. So you can understand in a society where you wouldn't promote that, but you're certainly not against it when it happens. Do you understand? So you're not against it, but you're not saying to the children, for example, you can be whatever you choose to be, blah, 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 if they're not that. You understand? So you can understand that, but you would teach them, I suppose, the science of it all to understand where certain triggers are coming from. But if you're born that way, it is what it is. You understand? And as I say, we have to be careful as a culture that we don't marginalize hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites, or gatekeepers who may get caught up because society is not really offering some kind of alternative, or they don't understand who they are and they get caught up in certain lifestyles, you understand, where actually they play such a prominent role in the next level of evolution for our race, that, you know, saying they need to be comfortable and be celebrated, do you understand, in that way. But, you know, we understand the role of sacred masculine, we understand the role of sacred feminine, the circle and the square, do you understand? So men have their roles or what they are supposed to do, and women have their roles, what they're supposed to do, but both are equal. The woman is not a helpmate to a man, you understand? That's not her job. She's not a slave to a man. She wasn't. That's biblical understanding and interpretation, do you understand? And you have systems in place that work for your household. If the woman's working and you're a man and you don't work, then you should be cleaning up the house and making dinner and looking after the children if you've got children. If you as the man works and your woman doesn't work, then it should be vice versa. If you both work, then you need to work out a system where those responsibilities are shared. Of course, women naturally, as the maker and producer of the child and sustainer of the child, in that regard, will always have a slightly different role in that regard. But that's how you have to build your society in that regard. So we don't marginalise people. We don't, discriminate because a person is whatever, gay, lesbian, or transgender in that regard. Obviously, if you don't want that to happen, they need to make sure that women are not stressed. They're not stressed during pregnancy. But again, in the end, somebody could be born hermaphrodite, and they may lean towards a certain type of preference. In the sense, it's still male or female. It's just not male or female physically. Do you understand? It's a chemical attraction. But then I suppose that's what love is to some degree in that regard. So it is what it is. As I say, no one troubles you, or no one's asking you. If a woman's not asking you for your number, why do you care? You understand? If a man's not your man, a man's not asking you for your number. If you politely refuse, why do you care? Do you understand? At the end of the day, as I say, you need to stay more out of people's bedrooms. Stay out of people's bedrooms, you understand? Because Pa and Athara don't care. I'm just being straight with you, they don't care. So they're not interested in that regard. You know what I mean? They don't care. So if it was to become a thing where people are being fooled, then that's something different. But as I say, what's being pointed out to you is that you have you're being taught everything just to understand it all, how it all works, and live according to your nature. If somebody's trying to fool you, like as I say, we see in this society where there's an over-promotion of certain things because they've got a different agenda. They're not interested in gay rights and things of that nature. They are interested specifically in population reduction and population control. You understand? So that is something that you need to be made aware of, so you can, you understand, be subject to it and make your decisions accordingly. And that's why you've been taught about it for years before. That it's coming, and also they're not to put it on them, but their race is deteriorating as part of that process, and that's why you're seeing a lot of that stuff taking place. So you can't base our culture on their behaviour. So that's I think is the point that I'm making. Any questions?
Yes, there's a question from Louise. What are the significance of the flooding happening in London? I remember listening to an old recording of the master teacher, and he mentioned the UK being underwater. We just didn't know when it would happen.
Yeah, I mean, remember there was a Native American woman. It's in, I think, the Wapian calendar. Laurie Adi Toyi. Yeah, so it was a Native American child who was born. And she's obviously a big woman now. But she basically received a vision, and she produced the I Am America map, which I think is still available today. So, and that showed basically, I think, 50 or so vortexes around the planet, but it also showed how the planet would look as a result of global warming. Do you understand? So, I think global warming and obviously climate change. So, one is they're both naturally occurring and also contributed to by man-made activities. Sometimes they like to argue between the two, but it's obviously a combination of both the things. And so she had basically determined from that map, which also showed, in fact, Tamaray on the map as Wahani, as one of the locations of these vortexes. And I think there's one in Scotland on the map. So there's different vortexes around the planet which open up every 10 years on the 3rd of every year, and so the next one 2023. So this shows, I think, London underwater, and I think the new coastline is in the West Midlands. Yeah, so the government knows this. The difference is that they're just predicting that they say, oh, it's going to happen in 100 years' time, or whatever the case may be. But obviously, what I think what you're seeing there is, it's a lot, it's possibly a lot quicker than that. Yeah, so unfortunately, sometimes we don't think it's real until it happens to us. Now, I'm not saying to say that it can't be stopped if certain behaviours are changed, but which is clearly why the government's pursuing zero carbon by 2050. But whether it's gonna, because London is known as the basin, and so that's why you have the Thames barrier. So it's obviously slightly lower in terms of sea level than most places, and not with the fact as well. There's a lot of building in London, so that also causes the land to drop down or sink a little bit as well, so that doesn't probably help the scenario, the situation. So you get a lot of flooding, isn't it, of the tunnels, because it has a significant underground tunnel network in that regard. So yeah, it's a problem they're going to have to solve, or worst case scenarios we've seen, interesting enough, whether that's connected, that they're moving a number of their headquarters to the Midlands. So if something happens, they can obviously got another office or whatever where they can relocate to. So yeah, definitely a real I Am America map is the one that he was making reference to. Any other questions?
No questions for me.
And the same here.
Okay, so I'll just finish off maybe this slide and then we'll call it a day for today's session. So basically, another triad principle here. So the characteristics here are circumference, which we've been speaking about, radius, and diameter. So the sun has what? Moon has it. So these characteristics are important in terms of, I suppose, time, isn't it? So certainly this can have an impact on planetary movements, how we measure things, etc. So it's important that we calculate or we understand the impact of these three elements. So we're gonna so this is another thing that we're going to explore probably next class, but we talked earlier about how the female was removed, as I say, from a lot of the record keeping. So the lack of understanding of mitochondrial DNA and the fact that you have to have a daughter or whatever to carry on your genetic line, and how they basically removed the female in their religious books and so on and so forth from their beginning. But in ours, in our optimum, we maintained that standard. It's one of the ways in which the records got lost. The other way in which the record got lost is what we see here in verse 7 to 10 of Lost Records of Time, is because of the lack of understanding of something referred to as precession change. You understand? And as I say, how does the axis of the planet in something referred to as precession of the equinox, it shifts 1 degree every 72 years. Now, when we get into the next class, we'll break down to you on the back of the dollar bill how you see a lot of that symbolism. It's got nothing to do with the Illuminati, but rather it's got to do with solar biological systems that we, as the ancient Africans, ancient Egyptians, had in place to monitor, as I say, the impact of how various different suns from different types of constellations, the impact that they have here on animals as well as us as human beings on the planet Earth. Now, we understand energy that we're receiving from one sun, because we use solar energy, isn't it, to heat water, to power, provide electricity for certain types of appliances, etc. But us, when we were in our fuller knowledge as ancient Egyptians, we understood how to use the power being taught by our higher ancestors, how to make use of energy from multiple suns. Understood? And so depending on where that constellation was pointing, you're going to get a different type of energy. So it's going to be hitting the planet at certain points. So you'll be able to take advantage and make use of that power. Understood? And if a certain event happened which basically knocked the planet off of its axis, which we'll go into in future parts of this, and so a new calendar had to be required. But not understanding precession change, understood, is because obviously because the planet's rotating on its axis, and then the axis itself is also moving, different star constellations are going to be in different positions, you understand, over a number of years. They're not going to appear in the same location. So you need to understand that, because it's caused certain confusion. We were talking earlier about the rise of Sirius and how you could use that in one system. But 10,000 years ago, you understand, it's not going to be in the same position that it was. And so understanding that is part of the reason why certain things got confused, as well as cosmology. We're going to get into that next week, but we'll leave you, I suppose, with this part to say that one of the major points of confusion, and this is even for us, we have to understand that most of the things that people are reading about in their Bible or their Quran or the Torah are nothing more than planetary movements and movements of star constellations, explosions of solar systems and things of that nature. You understand? That is what he's talking about. So a lot of the things or the characters or the people never existed. They never existed. You understand? So yeah, if you can get your head around that, which is why birth of religion even preceding this particular actual fact, we probably should have covered a bit more of that, which we'll do next month, next class, is because you have to understand how religion started in the first place, and how it relates to a lot of cosmological actions, which we'll cover, I say, we'll go into this in more detail, but excuse me, Halley's Comet, you understand, comes to this planet, we see it every 70 odd years or so, isn't it? So we see it in the sky at one time, and then it disappears, and yes, but then it's going to be coming back again in a certain amount of time is it going to be returning. So absent, it's going to be absent for a period, and then it's going to be returning back again, isn't it? You understand? Think about that Jesus story. Appear, you know, in the sky at one time. Revelation 22:16 says he's a bright morning star, and then he's disappeared, and then we're here. He's supposed to be coming back again. Understood? So absent and then appearing, absent then a reappearing. Understand? In these cycles, and as I say, we as ancient Egyptians, the reason why we named star constellations after very prominent individuals, because we recognize that we are stars. Yeah? And so in order for us to be close to our Parnatharu, we're going to build heaven on earth, because to maintain the connection, because we are the evidence of the people who have lost that connection. So they, when we were back then in the higher types of living our best life in the best environment, we maintained a connection with the heavens. So when you walk down the street, you understand, the buildings reflect the heavens. You understand? Our culture reflects the heavens, because in the heavens is the higher form of us. Understood? So we maintain that connection with our ancestors in everything that we did. Understood? Even the way society was structured, that's how detailed we were. So we had a connection where we recognized, okay, boom, okay, that's Orion star constellation, what they call Orion star constellation. You know what I mean? That's connected with a star. You know what I mean? Sirius, that's connected to Ashtar or Isis, who they call Isis. But we understand that it's star constellations. Understood? Understood it's star constellations. Somewhere along the line, with the Sumerians, for example, the Sumerians started naming planets after people. Yeah, the same way you name a street, Martin Luther King Boulevard, or, you know what I mean? Whatever. Marcus Garvey's Centre. Do you understand? But if somebody said, I'm going to Marcus Garvey's, do you understand? Obviously, in a certain area where there's Marcus Garvey's Centre, they understand that it's a building. If they wrote it down, I'm going to see Marcus Garvey, somebody might interpret that as, well, wait a minute, are they going to see Marcus Garvey? Marcus Garvey died. You know what I mean? Let's say he was looking back. And somebody wrote down, I'm going Marcus Garvey's. I'm going to see Marcus Garvey. Okay, I'll meet you at Marcus Garvey. They don't know it's a building because they think it's Marcus Garvey. Do you understand? Because it's been named after Marcus Garvey. So somebody else looking at it would get confused, isn't it? Do you understand? So the Sumerians started naming planets after people. Saying like but not for the same reason why we did it, but it was the same way to them. It's like naming it after a building, isn't it? Or the Anunnaki or certain extraterrestrials to them. The planets are ships, crafts, or whatever. So they're naming it after people, and then so when the artisans are picking it up and they're writing certain stories, yeah, Anshar attacked Kishar. Do you understand? Well, unless you know Anshar is a planet and Kishar is a planet, you think it's two people because they also are people. So by the time that knowledge got to the so-called Jews, the Jews thought the planets were really actual people. You understand? And so you have your 12 tribes of Israel, 12 tribes of Ishmael. Do you understand? Jesus had 12 disciples. You understand? Which are star constellations. What woman is having 12 children like that? You understand? Each time 12 children. It's star constellations. Yeah, within a system which we have to get into and obviously unpack. So this is where this confusion is coming in, and whole people have built religious doctrines and cultures around that confusion, and the ego won't allow them to change. When they point that out, I can think of many Rastafarians and same with 12 tribes, all this type of thing. People have built whole cultures around this error and mistake. That is the ego going to allow them to change? You understand? Because they don't want to be embarrassed. You understand? So The reality is when the truth comes, because remember we're in the last days and times, correct? Then the 24,000 year cycle, all false things perish, truth, their facts must prevail. These are the things coming. Okay, boom, let's go back to the original. There you got a being. Let's go back to the original ontology. Let's go back to the source and find out how it all works and how it all evolved. And this is the problems that we're starting to see now. Yeah, that it's all fake. And you can see it in there, isn't it? Mars is the god of war. Mars is depicted in Roman form of astrology, excuse me, as a warrior. It's a person, isn't it? But it's also a planet. Same way Venus is the god of love. And it's drawn and depicted as a person, understood? But Venus is also a planet. So if you forget, I'm going to tell you what the symbolism is, it's going to cause problems because you think it's a real person. And sometimes the way they describe it, you understand, it causes that problem. So when art, listen to this, guys, when art manifests itself as fact, it is known to cause problems in human development. Art manifesting itself, or masquerading, excuse me, not manifesting, masquerading as fact, that causes problems in human development. Art. Yeah, because most of these scenarios of people drawing or their interpretation of, God or what certain things are, this is what's causing all the problems. Yeah, so this is another way that the records got lost and misunderstood. And this is why all Sabian men and all Sabian women were required to be, well, not one, basically, but one of the reasons why you were to join, if you're a woman, the Eastern Stars, all of the Eastern Stars, and if you're a male, to join the Sabian Grand Lodge, because Masonry is the language of symbolism. You understand? You have to understand symbolism, yeah, because we as ancient Egyptians use it to keep knowledge away from the fall. But as well at the same time, you can see where the symbolism has caused confusion. You understand? Bible, Quran, so on and so forth. So what is symbolism? What is reality? Do you understand? What must be discarded, understood, and what could be retained? Because when the master's writing, he's saying discard everything that they're giving you. Discard it all. It's all junk. You know what I mean? We need to start again. Yeah, everything he's ever told you to date it's been a lie, and it all needs correcting, setting the record straight, so to speak. And the more we go into our culture, the more we see how certain things are. Our stuff has got nothing to do with their kind of spiritual or esoteric doctrines, you understood? And just because it may have some little bit of similarity here and there, or some codes in there, that's only because they copied a lot of the stuff which either they stole, understood, or in some instances we gave them to help them, and they took advantage of the situation. Understand? So this is very important. As I say, next class we're going to go into a few more details, some technical stuff which you need to understand about conjunctions. You need to understand why stars and certain constellations look a certain way. So you need to understand why it looks like that way, because if someone's showing you Orion star constellation in the sky, does it look like that? Does it really look like that if you was to go close? You know what I mean, in your spaceship or whatever, and drive up close to it? Does it really look like that? So we need to just move away perception, reality of certain things, understand technical terminologies surrounding astronomy, and then look at this thing called astrology. It's not what people think it is, and we didn't use it in the way that it's been used to date, not for individual guidance and purpose in that regard. Too much errors in the process. So, any final questions before we close?
There are no final questions. There's let's just see. There's one from Peter. Says, what does Parnatharu do to those who are not Sabaean who hurt or attack Sabaeans? Is there a punishment from Parnatharu?
So read that question to me again. So let me just get it
The
clear.
question says, what does the Parnatharu do to those who are not Sabaean who hurt or attack Sabaeans? Is there a punishment from Parnatharu?
I mean, it depends what the rationale is. I think we did a class, I think called natural law. You might want to refer to that class. So it depends what it is. I mean, if remember, there are natural laws that sort of kick in as a form of protection. So I suppose if you attack another person because of their race, for example, natural laws kick in where the punishment is not just on the individual who did the attack, it befalls on their children as well. It's referred to as the code of the races. So, and that's obviously to deter people from attacking individuals just because of their race or their genetics or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, there are obviously laws that kick in. Parnatharu as a group or an entity, but they're meddling in the different affairs of human being. We are supreme beings in their own right. So, of course, if you call upon them, you can draw down protection, but more importantly, your own ancestors are in your own bloodstream. You're 30, you're up to your great-great-grandmother, great-great-grandfather on your mother's and father's side. That's who you need to be connecting with to deal with certain situations if you require that esoteric protection in that regard. Now, we're not spooks, so if people are attacking, you need to take whatever precautions that are appropriate within clearly legal means. But if you need to draw upon that esoteric power, that's what it's there for. Do you understand? If you think about it physically, if you were in problems or trouble, you're going to call on your brothers, your sisters, your family, whatever the case may be. So in the spiritual, they're just in a different form, isn't it? In an energy state, and they still exist within your bloodstream. So you need to utilize both. Understood? If somebody's causing you problems. Now, our ancestors, when it comes to drawing on that type of power, they don't play. So, you see some of the prayers, for example, in the Gold Book, number 18 specifically, in that particular book, you put it's there where you can draw for protection and put people's name in there, but their situation, they don't forgive and they don't forget. So this kind of idea of this turn the other cheek, understood? So that's why I suppose people are more measured with how they use it, you understand? Because we talk about wiping out people's children and all that, can wipe them out of existence, you understand? So if someone crosses us, it's that type of talk. It's not, we'll make them just fix up and we'll be cool the next time. It's like, no, wipe them from existence. That's how the prayers read. So, ancient Egyptians, even now today, they don't play, and the Parnatharu don't play, so they need to be think carefully before you draw on that kind of power in that regard. So it's more, I suppose, if people are attacking specifically us, then why draw for the power. That's what it's there for. If it's something, different to that, then you want to call on your lower ancestors, your Salafu, to assist you in that regard. If it's more of a personal situation or matter, to them to aid you or assist you in that situation. Any other questions?
No, there are no other questions.
Okay, well, thank you for your patience with the late start today. So you can see we've opened up a lot of complex subject areas, and so we do want to work and make sure we bring that to an even clearer conclusion. So we've got a lot to cover in part 2 in some detail. So look up the things that you've heard today in some detail. So Dennis Fisher, we haven't even covered half the things around as the world turns. So probably the first part of the next part we'll be just focusing on the planet, planetary movements, things like eccentricity, obliquity. So these terms, which fancy terms, but to understand what they mean and what impact they have on time and us here, obviously on the planet Earth. And then we'll talk, I say, a bit more about precession change, 2012, some of the symbolism that sits in that, and what it means to say for us as males and females in that regard. A lot of the things that have been predicted or whatever have already happened. So obviously a lot of people quoting revelations and different things like that. Those incidents already happened, and take place. So, you know what I mean? Even some of the events that we're going to be speaking about, precession change and different things that they've already happened, but we'll speak about them and then obviously look forward to what is to take place in the future and what are the most important dates that we have going forward. But so thank you. This class should be up on our YouTube channel at some point this week. Let me try and see when our next date is. Just bear with me, people. There we go. We're next up August the 15th. That's our YouTube channel there. So check out some other classes on there if you need to follow up on some of the subjects here. Lost records of time, 15th of August. If you've not registered for part 2, just like a different link. Just register for part 2, I need to do it once, and then you're good to go. All right, okay, everybody, please stay safe, take care, appreciate you joining us today, excellent questions, and we'll see you on the 15th if you enjoyed what you've heard today. Okay, take care, everybody, we'll see you soon.